Okay, so it's September 21st, 2016, and noting the hour is 7:04 p.m., I'm calling the Board of Health meeting to order. I will review the basics of the agenda, and then I'll go over any items that were not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance of this meeting, so they're added to what had been posted earlier. In any case, at 7:15, we have scheduled a discussion of open meeting law complaints received.
I'm sorry, is your mic working?
No? Is that better? Oh, that's loud. Okay, yes. All right, so at 7:15, we're having a discussion of open meeting law complaints received. At 7:30 p.m., there's a variance hearing for a septic replacement. And at 9 p.m., we'll be continuing the public hearing for regulation review. The items that were not anticipated 48 hours in advance include requests for a new disposal works installer permit, two disposal works installer permits, and a request for a BOH advisory statement regarding water conservation in the drought. Okay, and just to review also how we do the meetings, there are other items on the agenda. There's chair's business, agent's business, and then other business. And we take these in between the scheduled appointments and hearings. So, let's see, actually, let's take care of the permits now.
Okay, both of them are new. Neither has ever worked in town before. The references on the first one have been checked. He just has not yet submitted his insurance information, so it'll be conditional to that.
Do you want to stay with the permit is for?
Both of them are disposal works installer permits. The first one is Ernie's Excavating out of Acton. And he's planning only, I believe, to abandon an existing system, not even install, but the regulations require that in order to abandon, you need to be a licensed installer. So we're just holding it for his insurance, but...
Okay.
So Ernie's Excavating out of Acton. I don't know this group or Ernie. Do you?
No.
No.
But she checked references, so. Okay, so do we have a motion to approve this permit?
Motion to approve.
And actually, I'll add subject to receipt of insurance information.
And also conditional to a pre-construction conference.
And pre-construction conference.
Yes, that motion.
Okay, second, and all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and can I have a pen appropriate for signing? I just have a felt tip.
The other one
The
is...
next one?
Also disposal works installer permit. Ketrix Construction out of Dover. This was, I don't know what it's for. He submitted his insurance information. He said where he's supposed to list references, he's a beginner. So there were no references to check.
Okay. Have we ever had that before?
Well, typically, I believe you have approved them with the condition that they work closely with the agent and the engineer. Very closely with both of them throughout. You have to start somewhere.
So he has a project here he wants to work on?
I don't know what it is because that was left on my desk.
Okay.
Maybe if he gets one under his belt or something, or
Yeah.
And it might be ours, though, whatever it is.
maybe one.
Okay. So do we have a motion to approve this permit subject to pre-construction conference with the agent and working closely with the agent and engineer in projects. Okay, and second, all in favor?
Also, some discussion.
Oh, do you need more discussion?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, we have to see if this is his first project. And in that regard, we want to know feedback from the agent regarding amount of knowledge or collegial kind of back and forth discussion, or if, if they can talk the same septic language.
Okay, and actually, so the permit is good for a year, might a condition?
No, they're only good until December 31st.
Oh.
This year.
Oh, all right.
So yes.
Oh, calendar year. Okay.
Both of these are short.
I was going to say, we might want to condition it to, if things did not go well, that we would revoke the permit, but,
They're both very short term.
yeah, okay. All right.
The agents will have to be on it, so yeah.
Okay, so, right, let's then remember to note that the agent should give this some extra attention or
Yes.
be
That's all.
aware of the beginner status of the applicant.
Thank you.
Okay, so you missed the discussion, but you can decide whether, yeah, so,
Aye.
all those in favor? Aye. And you can abstain since you missed
Yeah, I
it.
missed it, so I'm gonna abstain.
Okay, and then, 3 minutes. Request for BOH advisory statement regarding water conservation and drought. So a lot of towns are certainly doing that. That does usually come down from Mass DEP. For public water suppliers are required to make those sorts of announcements, but perhaps we should have something informational on our webpage. I don't know what you think about that.
Seems to be in the news every night. We're extreme drought condition, which I guess is level 3 out of 5. There are another level, and I think emergency level, but
I don't think I'd want to try and recreate the wheel, but maybe just point people to a page, I don't know if it exists, of recommendations for what to do during a drought.
yeah, I'm sure there's something at the state level on that.
Okay, so is that something you're willing to look into, Helen? Or able to? Yeah. Okay. Okay.
No minutes? Okay. Cross it out.
Did anyone have any comments on the drought issue?
I think it's pretty much in the news.
Yeah. Yes, I have heard people talking about either their wells or neighbors or friends' wells that are not producing in the same way that they used to. So I think people are somewhat aware in town. Is review of emergency preparedness a 2-minute item? Or not quite? Okay.
I gave you,
Is it in?
a letter that just came in today, actually.
Okay, yeah, so just under,
Okay.
Region
Rebecca, it's page 2.
Of tonight's.
This year, Region 4 has combined with 4A, which Sherburne is a part of, has combined with 4B, and all of the, as one much larger public health coalition, and we're now a health and medical coordinating coalition. It includes emergency medical services, hospitals, it'll be the public health coalitions, long-term care, and community health centers. And previously, up till this year, the International Institute of Greater Lawrence was the fiscal agent who handled the grant money. Beginning July 1st, it's now the Cambridge Health Alliance, who's the fiscal, or the fiscal
agent.
or the Health and Medical Coordinating Coalition, it's now called.
And is Cambridge that for the whole state or just
No,
for
just
our
for
region?
our region.
Okay.
6 regions.
Yeah. And this letter came today that Sherburne will have $5,000 in grant money that we can spend. We need to follow can spend it only on specific items. It's not free reign.
Yeah, it's refrigerators for vaccine storage, it's fax machines, it's...
Anything public health emergency preparedness based.
Okay.
So,
And from all the meetings that you go to, do you get ideas about things that would be good to spend that on?
Here's a list, yeah.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
all right,
But that just came today. So
okay,
that would be interested to you.
Thank you.
okay. So, and is okay.
I think we've been without a fiscal agent for a number of months now, so it's good that we're combined and have a fiscal agent so that we can move forward with funding from the feds.
Okay. All right, it's 7:15, and we have the discussion of the open meeting law complaints that we've received. There were several complaints submitted. Basically, the issues we're concerned about, and feel free to jump in, anybody, to add to this, that the listing on our agenda was not clear enough about what we might be discussing. And I can say that the listing, how would I say this? The intention was to have an agenda item that could capture the directions that we find that discussions around the health agent position go when we bring them up at meetings, because sometimes things start going into other areas. So it was an explicit attempt on my part to try to have it so that public discussion could address whatever people's issues were on something. So it wasn't an intent to obscure it, it was just to make sure that we could capture what we had experienced in prior meetings when we had topics that were more narrowly defined. And then other issues, I'd have to read the complaints. It's hard to remember which ones. Okay.
Excuse me, could you tell me how many complaints that we received?
We have two.
Oh, those are the official ones.
Yes, two official complaints.
But that doesn't account for all the ones that went to the town administrator.
Right, and we received other complaints via email. Let's see. There was also a concern, let's see, that I discussed adding 6 items not anticipated 48 hours in advance, and we voted to add 5 items. And that was because as I was walking in the building that evening, I was stopped by a couple of people, other town employees, who asked me about something they had heard about in a meeting that day that was going on. So I brought it up and discussed it with Rebecca because it was a possible warrant article item. And I didn't know if it was to be a board matter or not, and you basically said that it was a citizen's petition and therefore it wasn't appropriate, so we went back to the 5 items that we had noted on the agenda. So that was what was going on with that. Any questions on that? Okay. And I can say I'll be trying to do a better job of defining agenda items or listing more specifically the possible topics that we think might come up. I'll just try and do it better, and also my intent is this evening to just go over the discussion that we did have about that agenda item and basically repeat it here. Somewhat in summary form. Do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
At this point.
Anything to add? Does anyone have any questions?
For the complaint.
Wasn't there part of the complaint about the late hour of the meeting too?
That's what I was just checking. I don't...
It had been stated 1 a.m.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, it's hard to know what is a complaint versus what's just noting kind of what happened. So for anyone who was here at that meeting, we had a very lengthy agenda. There were a lot of very involved discussions going on, particularly, well, we had a hearing. For a variance hearing, we also had discussion about potential regulatory changes that we had anticipated might only take an hour, and I believe we spent 2.5 hours discussing that. There was interest in extending the discussion because we talked about ending it, but people in the audience seemed to want to keep talking about it, and there were a lot of good ideas that were being brought up at that time, so it seemed worthwhile to continue. I found the discussion thoughtful and technically in depth from various people in the audience who had a lot of experience and expertise, and so it was good to hear that. And the person who had the appointment following that was also interested in continuing the discussion and agreed to have their appointment come later. So really, we were marching through all of the things that we had on our agenda, first scheduled appointments, and then we moved on to agent items, because the agent was also here that evening and was interested in getting home, and so we took care of all the agent items, and that took us up till after midnight. And there were items, I think, that were important. In fact, one of the selectmen was here because one of the items involved a friend, and so that was a lengthy discussion so that they could share the information with that person. Again, so that went up to about 12:15 or so, and then we had things that were very time sensitive, permit issuances and things, decisions that needed to be made by the board so that people could proceed with whatever activities they were anticipating doing, and that really couldn't wait until our following meeting. And frankly, earlier in that evening, we had talked about having another meeting between that meeting and this meeting, and it really didn't seem like it was going to fit in the schedules of any of the board members. So we're often faced with this challenge of lots of work to get done and a late hour. We're not happy about staying late either, but we feel the obligation and responsibility to take care of those things, and I don't know if...
I think part of the problem is we start so late. We start at 7 for various reasons, whether it's not so much the members, but having a non-full-time agent, part-time agent who get here at certain times, whether it be the present Ethan or the present Mark. A couple things that were brought up at the Board of Selectmen meeting were the thought of having a drop-dead date at a time for a meeting, which had some debate. If there was something emergent that came up that needed further debate, it didn't seem like we should limit things to 11 or 11:30. I think we ought to, whether it gets voted into the town or not, we certainly shouldn't go past midnight, I don't think, because no one's awake, basically, or not at their best. So I think we ought to target that. No matter what time we start, we need to wrap it up. That sometimes pushes things more efficiently from about 11:30 to midnight, if you know you have that end time, whether it's statutory or not. And then if things aren't essential, just get pushed off 2 weeks till the next meeting. But I do think we need to wrap things up by midnight for sure. I think that's part of one of the 2 written complaints was at 1 a.m., which I agree with. But there was a lot on that agenda, on that docket that night that we had to handle and had to take care of. We can't expect a part-time health agent from living in the city to stay out here till past midnight, so we definitely have to do the health agent business. But that's about it. I mean, we just start late. We don't start at 6 o'clock. We start, well, it was after 7 tonight, so.
I agree.
Okay, and then that begs the question of whether we might need more meetings than 2 a month. So,
I think we should try to do it with the 2 meetings that we have, and then if we're not able to, then have extra meetings as necessary, rather than just scheduling them. I'm afraid we'll just fill it. Maybe we could try to limit discussion.
okay, so we're going to try and do better on time. Again, for anyone who was here for the 40B meetings as well. It was just tough. There was a lot of information to cover. We've spent a lot of late nights in the last year or so at meetings. And again, I think we're all trying to do our best and to comprehensively look at things and also accept a lot of public comment, which we had done at the prior meeting. Including lots of comment about the agent position, and we've had lots of discussions in open meetings about the agent position, about specifically the agents that we have, also about the position in general, about alternate staffing positions, so we've had lots of discussions on that topic, certainly over time. And there was one other thing.
There's one thing that I think might be leading to some of the confusion as well. When the job changed from being purely a contract position of being billed only for hours, the current agent became an employee. And that was the reason that there was an interest in creating a job position to be posted and then collecting applications. And so I think one thing that was confusing and that may still be confusing is that until that process is completed, the current agent is the agent by the new job description, where the old job description would have been simply an hourly thing.
You mean when they were a contractor?
Right. So so he was never suspended because he was still the employee until a new position is filled. So that is a very subtle distinction that you explained to me last meeting.
Yes, so...
The decision was being made whether the demand for work outweighed the importance of clarifying the issues.
Okay, so that I'd like to do, we have something coming up at 7:30, so I'd like to review the discussion, and perhaps we'll do that in between variance hearing and then the continuation of the public hearing. So that'll be the next item up for discussion after the variance hearing. I think, Peter, you were first, then, oh, okay.
And I apologize because I was here a little bit late and this may have already been discussed, but for clarification purposes around the open meeting law complaint, how was Mark Oram, or Mr. Oram, notified when to come to the meeting if the public hearing we had budgeted for 1 hour lasted well over 2? Many people left the meeting and then suddenly he appeared along, it's not a joke.
So that was the other thing I wanted to mention, because that's noted here, that Mr. Orm's attorney was in the room and never signed in as requested of all other attendees. A lot of people missed signing in, I'll just note. Clearly, this was a well-planned discussion. To the embarrassment of the 2 board members who had met Mr. Orm's attorney before, we did not know who he was, because as we finished the agent's business and we're moving on to the outstanding permits and other issues that we had to vote on, the time-sensitive matters, I asked if he had a particular issue that we could take out of that list? Was there one of those that he was interested in, and then we could move it up? And that's when we learned that he was Mr. Orm's attorney. And then, kind of brought back to my mind, but we had to ask who he was. We didn't know who he was.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, I still didn't recognize him, even after he said his name, because I hadn't seen him in a year. And I think I turned to you and said, who? So
Right.
he had a hat on and such.
yes, Peter.
Thank you, Peter Lifferman. I'd like to lend my personal experience of that meeting to this discussion, and I'm sorry it's going to take about 3 minutes. I was at the beginning of that meeting, and I stayed at that meeting until 12:35. The agenda item, from my perspective, and other people that were in the meeting, I believe there were as many as 20 people at the beginning of the meeting, saw an agenda item that said Board of Health Agent job posting update. Now, we knew the job was posted, we knew that resumes were coming in, and it seemed like not something worth sticking around for. So by 11:35 when I left, there were two other public people there in the meeting. One was Annette Domi, Bill Domi's widow, who I had not seen in a meeting in decades, and Mr. Orm's attorney. And I left looking at the remainder of the agenda as being nothing. I mean, you're going to be dealing routine business. You're going to say you had X resumes so far and that was it. And yet you took serious action in basically the absence of any remaining public, which was unsettling. And I understand your perspective, I understand your intent on that agenda item, but that's not what actually transpired. There were very, very long discussions, there were very other long items, but you know, after 12:30 at night, when I left and almost everybody else had left, we saw nothing more than routine business items, and yet you took up an extremely contentious item with many implications and many consequences at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I would just hope you never ever do that again. Thank you.
Susan.
Susan Tyler, I just want to make one comment, and I have to leave. You mentioned earlier regarding the complaints that you have received regarding the open meeting law on September 17th, or the alleged complaints of the open meeting law. And then tonight you said that, well, you're not sure which ones were, you know, if they were complaints or if they were comments. I will guarantee you that the form you received from me was a complaint. They were not comments. And I gave a complaint to the Board of Health and all the members, and as a courtesy, I also provided it to the town clerk and the Board of Health. By the state law, I only need to give it to you. I have given it to you on the official form from the state. I am still waiting for an official comment response back from the Board of Health.
Yes, and that had to be worked on with town council, so that is something that we'll also be discussing later on this evening. And I'm not referring to your form, I think was more direct, and then the other one, I just wasn't sure where kind of information and complaint began and left off, is what I'm saying. So I don't know if this person was expressly concerned about the hour. So going back to, I will certainly work harder to define agenda items differently. The other thing is, so when I first developed the agenda item again, to try and allow us to have a discussion that might take many different or include many different topics regarding the health agent position, because we know that any time that's been on the agenda in the last number of months or longer, that it leads to a lot of discussion. So we're well aware that people are interested in that topic, and I just assume that people are going to have a lot to say about it. But again, we're trying to take scheduled and time-sensitive things first, and it just ended up late because we had a lot to do. The ambiguity, the way it was done, there was a hyphen, and then it said also job posting update. That was there as a reminder to me to make sure to ask Dr. Quinn, who is spearheading the position advertisement on behalf of the board. So he's coordinating the activities around that, coordination with the town administrator, with tracking responses and that sort of thing. So that was a reminder to me to ask him, and I gather it was ambiguous because it looked like that would be the only thing to be discussed. And then the last matter is that it was an administrative task that we were dealing with as well. This was when the selectmen were concerned that Mr. Orem was continuing to work, but we hadn't received the letter from Ashland. They felt it would be a good idea to not have him to continue to work, so we didn't suspend him. We just asked that he stop what he was working on until we received information from Ashland approving him to work outside of Ashland. So there was that, and there was something else I was going to say. Oh, and we had also, at the prior meeting, one of the selectmen had expressed concern that they were hearing from people that they had lots of work coming up and that either it wasn't being addressed or they were fearful there wouldn't be enough time or they were having issues with delays in getting work done. And we had also just received a number of new applications because we're getting into a busy time of the year as well. So, again, I have to say at the outset, I didn't know for sure if we would even, if we would get to discussing this topic, because I thought at any moment the board may not be able to continue to stay given the late hour. We also, and we had new information that made it more compelling to try to get some services, provide the services that the Board of Health is supposed to be providing to the applicants and the public. And so we evaluated the situation. We talked about the choices that we had before us. And again, we'll talk about this maybe a little bit in more detail if we need to later. And we went ahead and decided to reinstate his hours or his services to supplement the other agent that we have working on an as-needed basis. And this is also something that's being done in the interim because the position is being advertised and people are applying. So it's a very short-term thing, and that we could discuss.
So a couple other points. So at the Board of Selectmen meeting, is they put it on the agenda, Mr. Colleen put it on the agenda for last week, we were present for that meeting. Mr. Yon brought up a good point, which was he would hope that given, this is a town employee position, that there would be input and active involvement by the town administrator with both job description, which I'm fully on board with. We have to meet certain criteria as far as a job posting. He's an expert. The town administrator is paid to do that, so I think it's important to include him. Obviously, vetting out any candidates, including the two we have sitting here. I'm fully on board with having a town administrator involved in that. I think the town administrator brings in a wider breadth of where this can be advertised. With the Mass Municipal Association, we have our own circles, which are the Mass Association of Health Boards, the Health Agents Group, so I think it will reach more people, and we're fortunate to have two excellent agents who are sitting here tonight working for us part-time. But I just want to reassure Mr. Yon and the selectmen and the residents that we absolutely want to include a town administrator because that keeps us doing things by the book as far as description of jobs and benefits and et cetera.
Peter.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Peter Lifford on Doppler Brook Road. You've just acknowledged in your comments how contentious the subject is. and yet at 1 a.m. with only 2 public present.
There were 3 people, but
Well, I only recognized 2 when I left. I don't know who the third one was. Do you know? Who was the third person?
is he here? He's not here anymore. Jeff Waldron.
Jeff was still there?
Yes.
Okay, Jeff was, my mistake. And I think the best description that can be put on this is unfortunate. I have to admit, it certainly wasn't nefarious, it certainly wasn't intentional, and yet Rebecca Honeywell's, Dr. Honeywell's comments in minutes to the effect that, well, I'm glad we're doing this when there aren't so many people here to harass the issue. You know, that speaks so much to why you shouldn't have been doing it. And again, I don't attach any nefarious intent to this, and I, as one who's served, knows the tremendous amount of work of volunteer boards and appreciate all volunteer boards, but I would hope that a greater awareness, a heightened awareness obtains at this point, and that we never see this again. Thank you.
Any comment on that? Okay, we'll take this up. We have a scheduled appointment. We may come back to this topic afterwards. Okay, so we have a variance hearing for a septic replacement on Goulding Street East. Are there any abutters? If anyone would like to come up and look on the plan as the engineer presents the circumstances that require variances, please feel free.
We did get all the green cards, so it's all set.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Eric Dickinson with Civilized Solutions. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. The project is 15 Goulding Street East. It's located just up the hill from the train tracks if you turn off of Route 27. It's an existing 4-bedroom, single-family home. The approximate location of the existing septic system that's in failure. The on-site well is in the front yard. It's about 50 feet off the house. We also located the neighbor's wells. Based on that, we did our testing outside of those buffers. They're all uphill, so we stayed outside. We were able to get a system in, so we decided to use a gravity system. It's a bed, Elgin, to avoid a pump. But based on those factors, we are requesting variances from the local regulations.
It's in the mailing. Just take mine.
The first variance is section 1.2 to allow the use of a bed designed to provide 100% of the required soil absorption system. This is an Elgin system. It provides secondary treatment. We also wanted to limit, these are smaller in size. It's about 40% smaller than a traditional system. We wanted to limit the tree clearing in this area as well. I mean, we still have to take down a couple of trees, but for the most part, we won't be going back any further.
Any comments from
I'm going over the plan with Ethan, but I've reviewed it and I find the plan in good order. Ethan is also looking at it with me right now. I was explaining the groundwater, that the tank inverts, okay, it's about 4.4 feet above the groundwater. That's it was within a foot. We're using one with the two-compartment septic tank, and it was explained why they're looking for the 2 feet. They're using an Elgin additional treatment. I don't see a problem with the request of the waivers based on the constraints noted. Pre-construction comments would be required. The only note I would make is that the sewer gravel is other material in place, not just brought to the site. So outside of that, I'm recommending waivers and people who want to sign the recommendation at the time of approval, it would be in favor.
Can you give a minute explanation of the term bed?
What they're doing is the approval for Elgin drains has been approved. I'm sorry. I was talking to you for some reason. I'm sorry if no one heard, but the approval of Elgins can be in different formats. They're using the bed format as explained. They wish to save some of the words. It could be put into trench formation. If you're looking at Title V, there is a section that says the preference is trenches. But in cases where the engineers feel they need, and they're also looking at the wishes of their clients to save some of the trees, they would try to do it in a bed formation. So the recommendation would be trenches, but they're asking for that waiver based on the information they provided.
And it's also that they've made other accommodations, right, to address the bed, so the Elgin system offers...
Yes, the Elgin system is a better system than it's designed to allow for the cleansing of the effluent that would be better than your traditional, conventional stone and trench. The other note I wanted to make is they are looking at 2 feet to groundwater, and based on the Elgin design, they are made to cleanse so they can have that 2 feet to groundwater. So it shows you the engineering in these systems have given them that permission at the state level. So it is a better design than your typical trench and stone
Thanks, Mark.
units.
Thank you. All right, so, any questions from anyone else? Okay, so do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 1.2?
Motion on that.
And second, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Continue to go through.
Yes.
Okay, section 8.01, to allow the bottom of the soil absorption system to be installed 2 feet above seasonal high groundwater versus 5 feet in order to reduce the site impacts and avoid pump. We're using an Elgin. DEP approval is not required, and we're not increasing the flow. It's going to stay as a 4-bedroom. We are proposing an effluent filter in the tank, and we are proposing garbage disposal.
So you want a motion on that? Some discussion?
Sure.
So a motion on that.
So, again, the reasons for that, second.
So, where is groundwater on this, and how do you determine it?
Our soil testing, we had about 54. The height was 50, actually, 54 inches below grade.
So much below 2 feet.
Yes.
Okay.
And the last variance is section 8.02 to allow the soil absorption system to be in an area of less than 5 feet of natural grade above high groundwater. And to be located in an area of groundwater of less than 5 feet. All 3 areas we tested did not have groundwater less than more than 5 feet.
So you want to finish
So
up?
those, we'll do that. But the last 2 variances are related, certainly. And again, we look at these in terms of site constraints that exist. It's an existing home, so we need to find a solution to be able to provide septic service to the home. And there are different, again, although it's a bed, although it's more shallow, there is more treatment being done by the system selected, and also the no garbage grinder certainly helps with the quality of the and the long-term maintenance of the soil absorption system by not having undigested material, possibly making it out into it and clogging it up. So those are all good aspects of this. And it was a failed system before, so it's an improvement to getting a new system replacing a poorly functioning or non-functioning system.
Elgin also does require a deed restriction on this house, which states that it will always be a 4-bedroom design. As long as the homeowner wants to add another bedroom, they're going to have to maintain the system.
You can't really add on to this system, right?
That's the caveat, I guess.
One-stop shopping, kind of.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Okay.
And then again, these last 2 variances both pertain to some conditions of not having the groundwater the depth that we would look for the new system. Okay, so all those in favor of the variance to section 8.01, signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. And do we have a motion for section 8.02 variance?
Motion.
And any other discussion on that one?
Just, it would be impossible to not grant this for repair.
Okay. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So, I'll close, is there anything else that we need in terms of variances?
Deed
Okay.
restriction can be noted for the,
Right, for the approval. So, all right, I'll close the hearing, and are the plans ready for approval?
yes, I just wanted to make, I'm sorry. Just wanted to let the board know that the system design is based on using the upper layer, which is what we used to call the subsoil, we now call it the BW layer. It's a very effective layer in cleansing out the effluent as well, so now you have the allergen and the BW in place, and both were perk tested, so that's how they get their 5 feet of soil, in this case for Sherburne. So I would recommend approval based on that. The majority of the holes show 5 feet of soil with the BW and the C layer. And it allows for additional cleansing with the requirement for the deed restriction.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the plan, subject to receipt of deed restrictions for the garbage grinder and for the Elgin system?
Motion.
And I'll second. And anything else? No? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Paul. Is it pretty good?
Okay. All right, do we want to go back to our discussion of health agent services? Do you have much more to say?
No, I don't. I just want to move on and get to our business so we don't have any meetings till midnight, but I really don't have much more to add.
Okay. Yes?
Also on these resolutions, one on here, just if there's any concern, there are 2 items on the agenda that are mine, well replacements at 30 Woodland and
Okay.
133 Nacerville Road. If they're anything brought up, and requested.
Okay, sure, let's do those. Okay. Okay, so we're going to take recess for just a few minutes so some plans can be retrieved for that. We're just taking a brief recess while Ellen retrieves, but
133 Nacerville.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
back from break, plans have been retrieved so that we can talk about them, so. Which one would you like to do first, Ethan? Doesn't matter today.
I have in my hands about 30 good ones.
Okay.
Okay, is that also Paul? Yeah. There's a request for variance for low replacement. Proposed well to be 104 feet uphill. Do you have the letter in front of you?
You approved the variance at the last meeting.
On this one?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So
Then
it's just the approval.
okay, everything's fine. The plan here that is submitted meets the requirements, yeah.
Okay, so do we have a motion to, we did approve it, do we need to re-approve?
You did not approve the...
Oh, we did not approve it, okay. All right, do we have a motion to approve? Okay, and then the second. Any other discussion, anything?
It's very straightforward.
And was this drought related? I
is
should
now.
ask you, was it drought related? Was this a drought related one, out of curiosity?
Yes, he told me that times the pump was pumping air, so he knew it was diminished.
Okay, all right, so all those in favor? Aye. And what was your other one, Richard?
133 Mason Hill.
Okay.
This house is currently vacant, but apparently it is for sale and apparently didn't pass a well test. So he knows he has to replace it.
So for
Also
quantity.
not a real.
Okay, everything here is fine in terms of I reviewed this earlier. And I'm just double checking here, sure everything was the same. This is what was that? It meets the requirements. Beyond the requirements of the code.
All right, any other questions from anyone? Do we have a motion to approve the well replacement for 133 Nixon Hill Road?
Motion on that?
And I'll second. Any other discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Okay, why don't we continue with agents'
Wait,
business?
want to roll?
Yeah?
The last one I have is the address 96 South Main Street.
Okay.
Okay, let me just double check this. This is also approved by the board.
You approved it because of the emergency.
Right,
So the
exactly.
board just needs to ratify
That's all it is, yeah.
approval. The permit's already been issued.
Okay. Again, potentially drought related?
I would say so.
Okay. All
How
right.
far down South Main? It's 96. Snow Hill.
Yeah, I can't picture, it. I don't know the numbers well enough.
Yeah, thank you.
What was the question?
Just how far down South
Oh,
Main?
yeah, it's right around that neighborhood there.
So it's a lot of houses down there, but we haven't seen any other requests, so hopefully we won't.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve
Motion.
or to ratify?
I'll ratify it.
Approval. Okay, and I'll second, and all those in favor? Aye. Okay, 59 Elliott, septic replacement, well replacement for approval? 59 Elliott.
Yes, 59 Elliott, it's a plan that's been approved for waivers, and they just had to finalize some of the, it's a plan that was approved with waivers, and that was back in March. They had to finalize a fee and revised plans, and in the revised plans, they also included as a separate document a groundwater profile. And with that, I spoke to the engineer last week and told him I felt it was complete to provide to the board for approval. I have the plans if you'd like to see them. I can open them up. This is the old, I should say, the house that was sitting there was dilapidated, and they went forward and divided the lot into the one lot into two lots, and it's a 3-bedroom design ready for approval.
I'd like
This
to
is
take a
actually,
quick look at it.
yeah, this is actually the 59 Elliott Street house, which is known as Lot 1. Can I just, okay, just come over here. It's okay.
Has the very long Has a very long stretch of land to the well.
Yes, it goes, a lot, sorry, Wells is the, profile that I had requested as well. The lot's unique, and the wells are unique also because they had to go way in the back. If you look way back, there you see how they went around, and they have to provide hay bales and conservation restrictions also important for this lot. So we recommend approval, obviously, with all of the town approvals received. I believe we know they received conservation, but through the construction, and their construction, and assure the conservation that all their requirements are being met as well.
And that's for this new piece?
Yes.
Wells field. And you're comfortable with the offset from the road?
Again, this was a repair, it came in as 59 Elliott Street, the other one came in as new construction.
Yep.
So they did get some waivers back in March.
So do we have a motion to approve the septic replacement, well replacement plan for 59 Elliott Street?
Motion?
And second. Any questions from anybody? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Let's see. Right, before we get into everything else, do we have any job posting update?
Posting update. Jobs posted in a couple places.
And also in newspapers. I believe that was expensive, so.
Most recently in the Mass Association Health Board's website, MAHB, so you can find it there on the first page. Again, I mean, we're responsible as a board to do our due diligence to put it out there as a job offering for people to look at and apply to. And we're fortunate to have two excellent agents sitting here at the table, so I am on board with keeping the advertisement up so that we can continue to serve, the town with health agent services, depending on availability to these two folks or anyone else who wants to apply.
Yes, Peter.
Couple of questions. What is the deadline for applications and how many have you received?
23rd, 2 days from now.
And have you received any?
Yes, but has the
Not
town
closed
administrator forwarded any more?
Not anymore, just the one
Okay.
set.
Just one?
The
One
one
set.
set. So there was one email where I received from the town administrator some inquiries. There have been none since. It's going to be closed out on Friday the 23rd. And then the town administrator and the Board of Health will look at those.
How many inquiries?
There's been a few. I don't really want to get into details because it's not closed out yet.
And how many do you have so far?
Right. A few.
Why can't you tell us?
I'd rather not. It's still open. It will be
Right,
closed out in 2 days.
The town administrator
and you'll
asked
find out in
us
2
not
days.
to discuss that, so.
I don't have an answer,
That's
Pete.
the number of submissions?
That's right.
Right, until it's closed.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you for that explanation. That's a lot better than I don't want to tell you.
Okay. And then, does anybody have any other questions about the process? And I don't know if we need to think about, is there some number that is acceptable for this go-round, or do we need to plan for if we get X, but we would prefer to have at least X plus 3?
Well, there's no set number, obviously. It's just whoever responds, and not surprising to me that there would be a few. It's not benefited, no vacation time, insurance, et cetera. It's not a benefited position, so.
Right, I can also say, so over the last couple of years when I could see that health agent positions were posted in Massachusetts, I would call up those towns and just ask them how the search was going, because at a number of times we've looked for additional agent assistance and that kind of thing over these past couple of years. And towns were often saying that they got 2 applicants, or very few. There are not a lot of people applying for these positions, and those were, as Chris noted, those often were full-time positions with benefits, so that is a big difference. But we have tried to reach out to folks. There are even people in town who have volunteered that they knew people. We've encouraged them to please contact their colleagues in the field and what have you, and have them apply. So, yes.
How long do you anticipate the process will take once you receive whatever applications?
I would hope it would move fairly quickly to get an interview and see if they're on board with sharing services with other agents that we have now. But again, it's a discussion between the board and the town administrator.
And I see it as also who has applied, what are the mix of skills, do we find everything that we need in one person or not? What their availability is and their new policies in place that the town administrator has put forth of documentation if they're working in another town, which it's not uncommon for health agents to have a full-time job, or frankly, lots of other agents for towns often have a full-time job in one place and then do extra work in smaller towns that don't have full-time positions. So that's not an uncommon situation, but we have paperwork now that needs to be filled out to disclose that. And so there's also just additional administrative layers for that. So. And we've had a tough time in the past filling food inspector position just because we're small, we're remote, the hours are irregular, not always predictable as to when the peak demands are going to be for services, so it's challenging.
So to be more specific in an answer to her,
Yes.
what's your experience with this as far as having a town administrator who's here during the day and we meet at night? I would imagine you could have a discussion with me singularly or you singularly, or can we say
I
within...
don't have experience because this would be the first time that we would be doing that, so.
So I don't know, I would hope within, say, 2 weeks of closing this thing out on Friday, we'd have an interview here.
Right. And the interviews are in open meeting, so.
What's that?
The interviews are an open meeting.
I can't speak to that, I don't know that. Why would that be an open meeting if you have a town administrator and a board of health member or a board of health member alone interviewing? Certainly if there's 2 board of health members.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if it can be done I guess we'll have to see.
So we'd probably start out as a phone kind of discussion between me and the applicant to get a sense for what do they know about septic, because that's what a lot of this, it's not going to be important very much if they know food inspection, because we peeled that off and that's a separate individual. But again, this board has to provide the service to the town. We're fortunate to have 2 excellent agents who are sitting here. Hopefully they'll continue to, and they don't feel offended by us bringing on another person to the fold if that's the case. But that's what we have to do as a board.
And again, since this is new in terms of coordination with the town administrator, how we're going to feed into that, so, and who we get and whether we're going to extend it or not, depending on what happens, the final count and pool of applicants as of Friday, so.
I might also say Ethan has won the state award for Health Agent of the Year, and Mark's and has many years of experience and knows the soil inside and out in this town, so. What was the award you won for the General Chemical?
Oh, that? No, I won the Unsung Hero Award from the Boston The other one I don't know about.
That must have been when you saved the person from the edge of the cliff.
That too. That's the third award that we're not going to talk about. But thank you very much.
Challenging credentials, it's just a matter of interest.
Yes.
Yep, absolutely. Reasonable question. There's a book that lists your name as winning an award, so I've seen it.
Thank you. No, it's the Dave Ozenoff Award from Boston University School of Public Health, and I was very honored to receive that, but thank you.
Well deserved.
Okay, so that's posting and staffing issues. The two agenda items, discussion of Board of Health staffing issues and review of our discussion. We covered a bunch of the review of the discussion. I will also note, we tried as much as possible to hear what the public had to say on issues surrounding Mark Oram. We talked about what research we had done, and again, this spans quite a long time that these discussions have taken place over. The Board of Health did its own investigations as allegations were made over the course of the last few years, but then the town hired an investigator. An investigation was conducted, no wrongdoing was identified, but opportunities for improving our paperwork were identified, which also came out from the Inspector General. Again, not wrongdoing, but not readily available proof to counter the allegations. So the things that the Inspector General advised us to do are best practices. They're not requirements. They're best practices. So we've moved towards developing those, and I think we're in, I don't know what iteration we're in, but we've come up recently with yet another version of a form that the agents use for recording their hours that has the things that they were interested in seeing, and that's been standardized, and it's been reviewed by the financial director. Is that the correct title for the person who reviewed it? Finance director, and also by the town administrator. So we've been working on that. The town of Ashland did an extensive investigation, and they found no problems either, and issued a letter that approved Mark Oram to work outside of Ashland with certain conditions on that, and so we've implemented that. Again, we have services we need to make sure are provided, so we've been trying to take care of that in a responsible manner. And in these meetings, we've heard lots of complaints about Mr. Oram, but I'll say that we also hear many positive things about him from people who are interested, when's he coming back, they'd like to work with him again. Those folks don't tend to say that in public. I can't always speculate why, but part of me says if they're worried about how people might perceive them or whether it's going to affect their business, they may not be as vocal about it, or they may feel that they're in the minority. But we hear a lot of positive comments about Mr. Oram, so we do hear a mix. And we took that into consideration, and that was part of our discussion at our last meeting. I'm trying to think of any other key points. We talked about some of the options that we had looked at for people to help provide services, again, in this interim period until we're able to interview for the new position. And really, we weren't we were hitting a lot of dead ends. It was looking promising, perhaps with the person who's working in Dover, who's very well qualified, and that got somewhat down the path, but there were some administrative challenges just to working out the details of letters of agreement between Dover and Sherborne. And also the expense was significantly higher, so. Any other things you can think of that we discussed that evening to repeat here? The main thing was concern, so Ethan was instructed to continue on all the things he's working on, and he's done great work. I mean, his work on issues around the camps and some of the other issues that we really haven't seen before that have been coming up has just been great, really great. We're very happy, so. Yes.
First, I just want to add to the audience and to the board. It's a pleasure to sit next to Mark. He's an old friend of mine, and also we went to grad school together. We sat together, I think, in the class, if I'm not mistaken. But more than that, I viewed my position here to simply continue on rather than make changes, but to sort of keep things on an even keel and to provide the services to the town residents that they deserve and that they have the right to. I think also, right now, at least for the short term, my goal, I think the goal is that to provide even more time available for the residents of the town. When I'm here, Mark's generally not here, and vice versa, and that gives more opportunity and more resources to the town, particularly as it gets busier with more and more septic. As we get into November 1st is that deadline. So anyway, I just want to reiterate that that's been my goal, and it's been a pleasure, and it's also it's nice to collaborate with Mark.
So daytime hours, Ethan, are you specifically speaking of?
Right now, I'm still keeping it on Wednesdays. There's one Wednesday in October I'll not be available, but for the most part Wednesdays, and also by appointment. But now since Mark's back, I think Mark can speak to his hours. But that's what I've been generally doing, and on occasion, if somebody, again by appointment, if there's a need during the rest of the week, and if I'm available, I make myself available.
That'd be helpful. We've heard that time and again from the residents that they really want to see some daytime health agent availability.
Well, Wednesday's daytime.
In person or in the field, so.
And my Wednesdays have been daytime, sometimes nighttime.
Sure. Depends, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. And I think one other thing we discussed too was that when Ethan started doing more of the health agent, all of the health agent work over the summer, it was good timing because he had sort of reduced demands from other clients, but he is in high demand, and so he's moving back into that high demand period. So we knew that we were entering a time when it would be harder for him to meet the rising number of applications and other issues coming before the board, so we want to just, again, maintain continuity of services. So, and you could talk about your hours.
First of all, let me compliment Ethan as well, because we had a frank conversation just yesterday about the fact that I was grateful and thankful that he was able to fill in that void. Unfortunately, that void was not created by me, but it got resolved, as you noted just previously. As it relates to what I offer, it's pretty much what I've offered through the years. It's later afternoon on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, and then on Friday during the daytime, but it's afternoon daytime. When larger jobs come in, as I've always offered, I can work daytime. I come in on daytime scheduled. As long as it's scheduled with my other town, I take time off and come in here. So it's worked out through the years. So we do have larger jobs. Might it be multiple? Usually it's multiple lots that we get, such as large subdivisions, and that's when I schedule 1 or 2 days for the soil testing during the daytime. And so it's worked out very well. And Ellen, I think she should not go unrecognized as I almost made you the town administrator, Ellen, as the health administrator.
That's going to win me a few points, isn't it? I'm sorry for that. As our health administrator is 30 years plus, she's very knowledgeable on pretty much the work we do. After 30 years, she's pretty much can handle the questions that may come in as well during the day. And that arrangement is perfect for the way it's worked out through the years. But again, I do have availability for larger projects. And if need be, Saturday, Sunday, nights, whenever there's emergencies and so forth.
Right, I recall you taking vacation time from
Yes.
Ashland once
You
for
were-
I
you
think a
helped.
multi-day project that I went out a few times
Yes.
during that to take a look because it was complicated. And I wanted to get a chance to see what was being done. The other thing also, I had every intention at the last meeting to revisit the discussion as we are now because I'm sure people would be interested. Again, we've heard lots of comment over time, and it's not as if this is something that would be a hidden action to just return Mark to working on projects as needed. So we're doing this, partly this was always the intent, was to discuss it and to address any questions people have. So feel free if you have any. Okay.
Go ahead, Sal.
We pretty much, the town meeting?
Sure.
Well, actually, I'm not sure what the status of all of the warrant articles is, but I just wanted to talk about town meeting. There is an issue of whether we want to invite any of the warrant advocates in to talk about the ones that pertain to Board of Health, whether we want to take any position on that, if you have any sense about whether you'd like to take a position. We're talking about the special town meeting that's coming up.
Madam Chairwoman,
Well, yes.
if you don't know, there are 4 warrant articles that are remaining at the town meeting. Are you aware of that?
I wasn't sure if the selectmen last week would...
There are only 4 that remain. One is a under $10,000 funding item. Second one is a fire department fee article. Third one is citizen petition to increase the Board of Health from 3 to 5. And the fourth is a second citizen petition authored by George Morgan and Dr. Hunter. So there are only 4 remaining articles that you can write down all the others.
Okay.
Okay? And in fact, in the advisory committee hearing, they did ask, in fact, if the Board of Health had a position on the 2 Board of Health articles. So you might discuss it, as you pointed out, you don't have to take a position, but you might.
So I want to find out if the board members, so would you like to say anything about your petition? Sure. Okay. Would you like me to, why don't I read it?
The background was that over the year that I've been a member of the board, it has been clear on many conversations related to some of the proposed developments in town that there clearly would be a benefit to the town if the members of the Board of Health are able to speak the same language and effectively interpret data to the benefit of the town. So this petition has been written and will be proposed as an amendment to, I want to make sure I'm using the correct technical designations. I believe it's an amendment to an article to the special town meeting which would apply to Sherburne. And this has been something that has come up in other towns in Massachusetts, according to the director of the Massachusetts Association of Health Boards. So the warrant article is to establish qualifications to serve on the Sherburne Board of Health. It is in the best interest of the town of Sherburne that members of the health board be experienced, credentialed health professionals or environmental scientists so that they are equipped to interpret scientific data and analysis and can fulfill the charge of every health board pursuant to Massachusetts general laws, which is to make decisions which will be in the interest of the public health. for the benefit of Sherburne residents, Sherburne natural resources, and the community as a whole. Massachusetts Boards of Health are responsible under the Massachusetts general laws, both state and local regulations, for disease prevention and control, health and environmental protection, and for promoting a healthy community. These are statutory as well as service responsibilities. Therefore, as citizens of Sherburne, we propose that the town of Sherburne establish minimum credentials for serving members of Sherburne's Board of Health to effectively execute this mandate to promote public health. There were 155 signatures. This did have a cover sheet which was more detailed, and we will need to make an amendment to this to specifically list the categories which we were suggesting, and that would include individuals with experience in public health, health sciences, medicine, environmental health, environmental law, engineering, and health law. Just as many other boards in town benefit from members who are credentialed and experienced in law, on the zoning board, planning and architecture on the planning board, etc. I believe that the health board will benefit from individuals who are also similarly experienced in health law, health, and environmental sciences, and that was the basis of this. In the face of very, very important issues in the future, which range from the dealing with the challenges of General Chemicals plume, which is heading to Sherburne, and our ability to negotiate with the General Chemical Company for a favorable outcome for our town, and also many of the proposed developments that have been discussed at recent meetings. But this also extends far beyond some of these conversations to the wide scope of health and environmental issues that are pertaining to the Board of Health in our town. And that includes things like Lyme disease and multi-resistant infections and Zika virus and other environmental threats. So just...
Don't forget emergency preparedness.
Emergency preparedness.
Any comments?
No.
Do you feel as a board you should make any kind of decision on this? It might affect whether we have discussion. Can you hear me? I should go forward.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
I'd just like to make a comment. This article has just been heard by the advisory committee next door. I was not able to participate in that because they're not taking public comment, but I would make a couple of comments. First of all, this article requires an act of the legislature. This is not something the town can vote for to do or anything else. It in fact basically changes the election law of the state, and as such requires that it go for an act of the legislature to allow the town to make these requirements. The language that was not on the warrant, because it was not completely shown to the people signing it, I believe I heard that language, and it said to the effect of to include but not limited to. And now, in my experience, that's a very useful phrase. But in this instance, if in fact the language that I heard was to include all these other specialties and professional characteristics and degrees and so forth, experience, was to include but not limited to, well, essentially it doesn't set any requirements at all when you say but not limited to. So I understand how do I put this? I understand the opportunity here to be on a soapbox and talk about all these issues and so forth. In my business experience, I take particular issue with people that try to scare people into doing something. And frankly, I'm going to take a risk here and say that that's what I see happening here. We invoke general chemical, and we invoke Lyme disease, and we invoke this, and we invoke that. And you know, we're trying to scare people into doing something that we've never done before. Dr. Honeywell actually misstates that we set no requirements for the planning board. We set no requirements for the ZBA. Yes, we're fortunate to have attorneys on the ZBA. We're very fortunate to have architects and engineers on the planning board, but we don't set any of those requirements. These are elected positions, and any person in the town can run for any of these positions. So to go and set some very stringent requirements for a Board of Health that, as I say, if the language is such, aren't all that stringent at all, I believe is a mistake. I'll leave it at that.
According to the advice that I received from our town council, the special act that we will propose will require a simple majority at the town meeting on the 24th of October.
No, it's an act of the legislature.
I'm just telling you what the town council told me. This will be proposed as an amendment and a special act.
Make a special act, yes.
Thanks, and then you next. Just say your name.
Yeah, Lisa Camp from 291 Western Ave. I guess I take issue with some of the statements that were just made. I think the intent of that petition, as I understood it and why I signed it, is simply that there's an obligation as per the Massachusetts regulations of what the duties and responsibilities of the Board of Health for every town is. And those duties include protecting public health, the environment, making sure there's sanitation, emergency preparedness, disease prevention and control, etc. Each single aspect of what the duties of any Board of Health member in any place in Massachusetts, and I looked at like 300 towns in Massachusetts, and they all had physicians or LSPs like myself, or health scientists, or environmental attorneys, etc. These are not people who had an agenda about pro-development or anti-development. They had a wish to protect public health of the community. And I think the concern of some of us is that we're hearing a lot of, you're stopping development, the Board of Health is causing 40Bs. I'm not even commenting on the potential veracity or not of those, but the Board of Health has a clear mission as per the state regulations. And I think that the intent of this was simply to say, we want to make sure our Board of Health people can fulfill the obligations that they're required to fulfill as per the state regulations, period. And that was the only intent of it. So it wasn't trying to stop something or prevent people from running. It's just saying, hey, the state does set what the mission is for every Board of Health. And we just want to make sure that the people who we're considering and electing can fulfill that mission, period.
And because Sherburne has 100% private drinking water wells, including the semi-public water supply, they are private systems according to Damon Gutterman at the DEP.
Yeah, that's not that right.
Okay, well anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is that we have no municipally owned public water supply. And in that situation, the onus of enforcing state and local laws, it falls onto the Board of Health, where in 97% of towns in Massachusetts, the DEP can enforce those laws, but in Sherburne, it's the Board of Health, and we need to be qualified to understand what we're discussing, what the implications are, the complex scientific variables. It's not simple, and unfortunately, in some recent discussions, there were scientists who conflicted with each other. There was complicated data, We needed to look at the presentation and understand it. It was confusing, and I think that the town would benefit if the members of this board, especially if we increase in number, are able to understand what they're discussing at a high level. And that's for everyone's benefit.
Chair Gina on Parks Drive, Summer. With all due respect to the comments that have been made about perspectives and concerns regarding requiring certain qualifications of the Board of Health, I think it's fair to say that I feel very strongly that I at least wanted to make a public comment first thanking you for everything that you've gone through over the last few months and actually a year or more that we've seen. And I'm going to sit down. Some of us have been in meetings for quite some time. I know some of us have been in meetings for even longer and seen a number of things play out. And I think it's very easy for people to be swayed by commentary that's made either on Nextdoor or Sherborne or on other forums where they haven't been actually involved in specific business to do with the Board of Health for any length of time. I wanted to make that comment, and I wanted to make a second comment. I completely agree with the idea that people need to be qualified to serve on this board because it's incredibly important to the future of this town and what is developed here and the impact on its people. But it's also important for people to be able to make decisions very quickly and have the knowledge base to make those decisions very quickly when it comes to matters of public health. In the case of things like new diseases that do arise, because those are matters of public health. There are numerous stories, and it's not a scare tactic. It is not a scare tactic to comment on stories about new diseases that are being discovered all the time. It's just life as we now know it, and life as we have to deal with it. So I think it's a wonderful introduction to the special town meeting, and I wanted to offer that commentary. I have significant concerns about particular individuals who have agendas and prefer to find their way onto a seat at the Board of Health. But I have no issue with someone who is interested in serving on any board as long as they're qualified to do so. So that's my commentary.
The intent of the article is not to exclude anyone, but instead to encourage people who have expertise to share, to work together, to enhance the ability to interpret things in the perspective of how they benefit the water supply, the natural resources, and public health in general.
Just to be incredibly clear, I have no perception personally that that's the intention of that at all. And I think it would be very interesting for someone to have the perspective that that's exclusionary. All it merely asks for is anything the public sector would ask for is if you're going to serve on a particular position or do a particular job, that you have the necessary qualifications to do that. I don't perceive that, and I don't think anybody would perceive that necessarily as unreasonable to ask for. Well, that's not the conversation that's
They come to the zoning board meeting on October 5th.
Okay, well, I missed that conversation.
We're not the zoning board, the advisor, excuse me.
Yeah. Is advisory, may I ask, is advisory financial in nature or administrative or?
They advise on all of them.
It's an interesting perspective.
It would be a huge financial impact on the town if our water supply is contaminated, not only in property values, but in the consequences to the health of the individual residents of the town. Did I see a motion?
I would say that my feedback actually is there are significant implications without even giving consideration to just the water supply. Right, so I think it's fair to say that this board in particular, at least in the time that I've seen it serve, has undergone a
particular level of scrutiny that is extremely high. And the town of Sherburne cannot afford, in my view, to have people who cannot reach into their toolbox professionally and be able to handle the stuff that's coming across your desk. So I think it's entirely reasonable to ask someone to be qualified for that. And the town of Sherburne will eventually have to contend with the idea that the water supply will have to be dealt with. And as we move through 30Bs and other things that change in town, we'll have to contend with those things. And if we don't start thinking about ways to do it, we're going to have problems no matter what. Just my opinion.
Thank you.
October what?
The 5th and 24th.
Should have come. I saw you moving towards the light.
I hate to take away from the momentum of positive comments in the audience for the Board of Health. It doesn't happen often. There's smart farmers out there, and it's an experience issue. Yes, there is scientific data that get presented to us, and it helps to have had some education in that area, but, I don't want to be self-congratulatory up here either, and dismiss other members of the community who could serve, based on their experience, which might be pretty darn good. But that being said, I totally agree we're going to be dealing with water issues, especially downtown, if we can get this thing moving downtown as far as some development. So that will have to be evaluated and looked at scientifically, and sure, it helps to know what we're talking about there, and contaminants and how they interact with the body. So it's just a comment that I don't think it should be a one-sided conversation.
Right, and I'd have to say for myself, so I don't think I would be on the Board of Health if it wasn't for the fact that I deal with a lot of these issues in my work. So the work is familiar to me. I came on, I figured I'm a nerd, I could fulfill this nerdy scientific role, and it's easier for me to look at stuff and grasp it, and yes, I've seen it before, and I work with clients on it, and so there are things that are a little more on the fringe of what I do, but I'm not afraid to dive into those technical documents and read them, and I do a lot of reading on the side for things that we're talking about here, just to, again, look at things if I haven't had a chance to touch them in my work. But I also think that there are a lot of people who have that capability, whether it's in their current job description or not. And I don't know if part of the election process is that you get a chance to see what people's credentials are and what their interests are and what they're expressing about what they're trying to do, and that's a way to get at this without trying to designate all the suitable possible professions that might apply to the Board of Health. And then there's one other thing I was thinking, and then the other part of me also wonders if we should be looking to expand either agent or consultant services to the board to address some of the specialty topics. And so we do have something out for assistance with looking at mounted systems, because when I've done the research over the last few years on that, I don't feel that the state level provisions address some of those concerns, and so we're going to have somebody take a deep dive and look at that for us, and maybe try to come up with something that would better serve the town. Maybe enable that, but also better serve the town based on science. So I don't know, do we want to take a vote? I'm somewhat neutral, or maybe, again, as I said, I think there are a lot of skills and abilities that people can have and bring to a Board of Health, so.
General, I just wanted to echo, I agree with you that particularly if it's an elected board, the intent may not be to be exclusionary, but I'm concerned that people looking at it, the effect may be, this the governance task force, we're looking at expanding the Board of Selectmen. One of the rationales is to have people with different experiences and backgrounds, and somebody with purely financial expertise, in my mind, could be a very good member of this board, regardless of what his or her degree says. It really depends on how bright they are. And I also want to agree with what Chris was saying, that it's not just farmers, folks that are interested in open space, folks that are interested in downtown development or non-development, all have perspectives that can be relevant. So I'm concerned about the warrant article. Speaking personally, I'm probably going to vote against it because primarily for the rationales that you two just articulated. There are lots of different expertise, perspectives, and judgments that help, particularly if it's a 5-person board, and particularly if it's an elected board.
So, and I guess the only other thing related to that is, as people know, and gotten in trouble for it too, because we have long meetings. I try to encourage input from all sorts of people on the topics so that we hear it, because you never know what someone, again, for whom this may not be their expertise, but you never know what ideas are going to come out through discussion, and I think it's healthy to have those discussions, but maybe healthy, but it's very time consuming, and now we're getting in trouble for that, and may have to cut that back or find another way to implement that. Just for practical purposes, and because it's like staying up ultra late and getting up at 5 in the morning the next day to go to work. So,
well, the cover sheet does list a long list of people who I think would be encouraged, and the main issue is to be able to speak the same language, because it's a lot more efficient if you can understand what you're talking about and what the issues are. It's not at all intended to exclude, but it is more like our board. We complement each other. We have different strengths and different experiences, but we all have background and experience that allows us to read the same paper and understand what the paper is talking about, which is a little bit of technical ability based on we have different backgrounds, but we can work towards the same goal in that way.
okay.
Anyway, so that's why it's a citizen's petition, not a board issue.
Okay.
So I've got nothing else.
Do you want
I think it'll stand on its own.
take a
so
vote, or shall we just?
I'm not particularly
We've had
interested in
discussion
voting,
on
because I don't know what,
that.
we just said it's a citizen's petition, so.
Okay. So we'll get a chance to vote at town meeting as individuals. Okay, so then the other one, well, there are two more issues for town meeting I'd like to talk about. So there's the other, I'm going from 3 to 5 members, if anyone wants to comment on that. And then I just want to talk about, should we have any information ready in case there's questions about what does the Board of Health do and what are issues that we see as important in the future. I don't know if we need to have any kind of side presentation ready on that.
Well, what was part of the impetus for this is that I've only been on the board for a few months, as you know, and what's shocking to me is the breadth of responsibility that we have, the large amount of information that we need to know, but the very small and limited view of exposure that people have. I think that most people's exposure is limited to their septic system, but what we do covers a lot more than that, and I think that the town benefits because of the fact that you have incredible knowledge of environmental science, and Chris has a lot of knowledge of occupational and health, and we all bring different things to the table, and I think together we can work well to the benefit of the public health. That's the mandate of the state. And who do you want making your health decisions? These are really important issues. So I think we benefit from having people who understand the relationship to public health.
Okay, so are you advocating that we should have a presentation possibly ready in case there's room for that at town meeting?
I don't think
about the Board of Health?
I don't know. I think we could talk.
Okay. Do you have
I don't think that it's necessary for the board to take a stance. I think if individuals want to talk, that's fine. I mean, unless you feel strongly that we need to. I think that we as a board should make an effort to educate our town for what we do, because there's a lot that we do.
Well, in a way, so I was thinking that at many town meetings, various groups get up and make presentations about what we're doing, so we've certainly been in the limelight and not often for good things despite all of our efforts, and I think we're all really trying to fulfill our duties to the best of our abilities and working hard at it and spending a lot of time, but rather than people saying, well, they work really late there, then we work really late and that's bad and we're trying to hide things. So sometimes I think maybe a little education would be good, just so people know what it is we are trying to accomplish. But
I would just offer that it may be helpful for people to understand on a level on some of the functions of the board, so that they understand the perspective at least. That both the request to add additional seats, the impacts that it would have, and also understand the perspective of someone who's looking for that particular expertise. There are a number of people, as you mentioned, that may be able to fill certain roles and give some perspective. But I think in your discussions, even tonight, you're talking about being more efficient. If there are matters of the Board of Health that have to be taken care of, that require a certain level of expertise, someone who doesn't have that expertise won't be able to operate as efficiently. I'm not saying that they should be excluded necessarily, but there are certain things they could lend their talents to, possibly otherwise, I guess. But until we understand fully what the Board of Health really needs to make decisions on, or at least have some broad view of the things that currently come across your desk on a regular basis. We all know about the 40B stuff, because that's the hottest topic on the table, other than some other ones we've already discussed. But I think it would help to give someone perspective on either side of the table, if they have an understanding of what it's actually like on some level to do your job. I think it would be helpful to talk about exactly the components, the different aspects, whether, the flu shots, the infectious disease control, Lyme disease, which is, it's a pandemic in short, and it has been for a long time. So there are a lot of other public health concerns in our town that I think affect a lot of us, that people maybe aren't paying attention to or don't understand that can be part of, or has been part of, the function of the board. I also think, though, like Carol, I believe you mentioned earlier, that you're considering having consultants or other things to help supplement on board. I think it would be honest and transparent for you to talk about, here are some of the things that we're seeing come across, our agenda or be an issue that we don't really have either the depth or the breadth of expertise right now to tackle on our own. So whether it's general chemical, like, Dr. Brown was saying, or setting the, drinking water regulations, or some of these other things that maybe not everybody has expertise on, I think it would be good to maybe just sort of highlight, and here are some of the things that we're kind of looking at coming down the pipe that, maybe would be good to complement in some additional ways. So I think it would be transparent and honest if you actually talk about that as well.
Peter?
I'm a little confused because the comments I'm hearing relate to Rebecca's warrant article. The one you were asking about is moving from 3 to 5, and if you to make a presentation on that basis, I would expect it would be focused on, the pros and cons of moving it 3 to 5, and frankly, to make a presentation, I believe you'd have to take a vote, to take a position. You can't just get up there and talk about this, that, and the other thing. You really, presentations are meant to advocate for a particular position. In this instance, moving 3 to 5, I think I would would like to encourage you to have a fairly extensive discussion about that, not just on board technical expertise, but also on logistics, management of time and progress on different issues and so forth, communication availability outside of the meeting and so forth. I don't think you can just say, well, let's take a position and we'll talk about what the Board of Health does. You should basically decide, do you really want to take a position on moving from 3 to 5, and what would that do?
Actually, I was talking about two different things. I said there were two things. The other warrant article, which was the 3 to 5, and then just generally making a presentation, which I just wanted to see was there any, did we see any value in that? And then I would need to talk to the town to find out if that even fits into the town meeting to just have an educational sort of presentation about the board. So people...
In the article?
Possibly not, right. I was thinking of it as a separate item. So the discussions here were about, well, gee, what does it take?
I misunderstood, and
Okay.
frankly, I've never seen that kind of a presentation in town meeting.
Right, but we often, just doesn't really come up to do that sort of thing. I don't know if it's the right time to do it or not, and I just don't know. But I wonder if it would be a good time to talk about it.
Yeah, just add a little bit on that, Jeff Holden on the advisory committee and also Sir Lane. I don't think you could, the only people with making a presentation is the person who is the petitioner, which is most citizen petitions. So the Board of Health would not make a presentation on either of the petitions, the petitioners would make a presentation. Now, you've seen in the past, like you'll see John Higley sometimes will then comment from the planning board or whatever, but the way the logistics the moderator runs the meetings, as I think you already know, is with the petitioner, whether it's a citizen's petition or the head of CMND or whoever's warrant article is, gets 5 minutes to present what they're presenting, what they're proposing. And then any citizen gets 2 minutes to either express their views or ask a question or whatever. So because the Board of Health isn't the petitioner, I think you would only get the same 2 minutes to make comments on it.
I think I was thinking along the lines of when advisory would make sort of the State of Sherborne presentation, right? So this would just be a state of the Board of Health, what's the Board of Health all about? That's how I was doing it, not advocacy or anything about the warrants particularly, but just here's what the Board of Health is and does. And I don't know if that fits in or not, but that is what advisory used to do.
We do have, and that's actually part of our goal, that we're defining because we're also defining what the tax rates are, what the, what we anticipate tax rates to be for next year. Of course, they can decide whether they would
Whether we should even consider it or not.
There's only 4 warrant articles.
Well, and that was the other thing, is there's sort of possibly a little bit of time, although we could stretch it out, right? Okay, all right, so enough on that until we know if that's even feasible. So on the other warrant article, does anyone have any comments on the 3 to 5 issue?
So, a couple of comments. I don't know if I've formulated my side I'm going to go on as far as I'll be there to vote, but so, Board of Health and members, a little bit like herding cats sometimes, so you go from 3 to 5, it's a little bit harder to herd the group of cats together to come up with, a proposal or vote on something. I've also heard on the other side of things, if you have 5 members, you can have 2 of the members talk to one another outside the meeting, and that seems to be what goes on with Board of Selectmen. And it seems to be add some level of efficiency so that when you get to the meeting, you can move things along, because some things have been decided outside the meeting among 2 members, one-on-one. So there's that. On the other side of it, there's a lot of 3-member boards surrounding us: Dover, Holliston, Millis, Wellesley, Weston, Norfolk, Franklin. There are a couple 5-member boards: Concord, Lexington, 7-member board, Boston, 9 in Springfield.
Framingham just went to 5.
From?
3.
Okay, so Framingham just went to 5 from 3. So, it's kind of split down the middle in pros and cons, and seem to be more 3-member boards. It's probably just historical. So I'm kind of curious what other people have to say. I don't really have...
Yeah, so I thought it was interesting that the director of the Mass Association of Health Boards, I asked her if she had any statistics, because I was curious, how many do people usually have? And you just mentioned all the extremes, and out of 351 towns and cities in Massachusetts, 291 have 3. And we, of course, are in a unique situation because our water supply is not a remote one from a reservoir or something like that. So our issues are more complicated. But we nevertheless find ourselves in this situation. So I thought it was interesting to learn what other people do.
And I don't have a strong opinion necessarily. I think there are pros and cons to either. I think just availability of people to serve is one issue. Would 5 distribute workload? Maybe, but there's a certain amount of work that has to be done by all the board members, so...
To me, it feels like all the work should be done here. I don't think we...
And that is something is that everything we do is out in the public, so... which is also why sometimes our meetings could be a little raw, because we haven't had a chance to chat outside.
I'd just like to react to what Dr. Cole was saying about smaller groups meeting if you have a larger board. I think particularly with Board of Health, where you are under a microscope about openness and open meeting, there would be a lot of danger in having non-quorum meeting to discuss issues, even if you were then going before the board. You have to be extremely.
And I'd also say, in the past, I believe that 3 members was more than adequate in the town. It's really the big projects that we had recently that tax, and then special issues that tax the board. But before that, I think 3 was always serving it well. So is this a new permanent state or not? I don't know.
So I would say, in the spirit of transparency, now that would happen. You'd have singular members talking to one another about issues outside the meeting, absolutely, whether it's Board of Selectmen, Board of Health, if it goes to 5. You can hope that you're not going to have those discussions, but you will, because it's allowed, and you want to come to some resolution of something, or move a proposal forward or not, or what have you. So that will happen, I would say.
Okay, I'll take one more comment, and then we could pick this up again, but we have the public hearing continuation.
Two quick points. In the spirit of Dr. Honeywell's article, if you go to 5, you can have a much broader range of experience on the board to draw from. You have a greater variety of credentials, if you will. And as far as meetings, conversations outside of a meeting with 2 members, frankly, that can be very beneficial, particularly if say, the board wants to send a delegation to some other board or some other meeting. 2 members can go and bring back the information. You don't have to post a meeting. It's not a violation of anything, and it gives you much greater flexibility in your outreach to other boards and coordinating with other boards in the town or from state boards and other towns. So there are issues on all sides, but I just want to make sure that it seems that the strongest thing I feel is that it brings far more credentials onto the board. Thank you.
Okay, so again, I don't have a strong feeling on this one way or the other, personally. And is this anything that people feel a need to vote on? Again, this is one I don't particularly feel a need.
It goes both ways, because the potential danger would be if people have an interest that would not that would benefit the public by being discussed in a public setting.
Okay, all right, so we'll move on to the continuation of our public hearing on regulatory review, and I'll get my notes on that.
Is that the remaining item on the agenda? Did you cover update on
Actually, we could do Abbey Road's status update afterwards, but we really do need to move on to that. And our Inspector General letter, we need to have a reply to that.
I just wondered what else is left.
And then the agenda items for the next meeting, so. And Ellen, in our packet tonight, did you include the new write-up? Okay. Oh, yes, there it is. Yep, got it. Okay, copy that. Okay. All right. So in your packets, oh, you've got it. Did you find this one? The one that stacked tonight.
Okay, go ahead.
So this, at the last meeting, we spent hours discussing how to address the zero tolerance for VOCs in groundwater. So I took another stab at it, and then frankly, even after I took another stab, I had yet more thoughts on that. But, so before I dive into that, I could go over kind of what I crafted, or if you have any strong opinions about where we ended up last time, and also if the health agents have any comments in particular on this matter.
I have two comments. One is procedural, and I don't know whether this is the right time or whether I should wait till the end of the meeting. And the other is, I would be very interested to hear what our health agents might have to say with regard to any changing of the regulations pertaining to VOCs, because it's my understanding that if we are embarking on addressing the risks raised by General Chemicals plume, which is heading to the water supply and has contaminated some of the wells in Sherburne already, does a change in our regs in any way influence our ability to negotiate and have a strong position with General Chemical in protecting our interests? And I think I'd be very interested in hearing what you and what the agents have to say, being in the worlds of environmental health science, but also I know that Ethan had mentioned that he was personally involved with General Chemical a couple years ago, and I'm very interested in hearing what he has to say about what he learned at that time. And I was wondering if we can ask him to present that information to us.
Sure. Was that the procedural
So the procedural question is regarding addressing trying to address the regs little by little. Do you want me to talk about it now or at the end? I would like to propose an alternative method of addressing, updating our regs, because I think that it might be more efficient, but I don't have to do it now.
Okay, let's talk about that. Actually, we might have to put that on the next agenda.
But I asked Ellen to put it on the agenda for tonight, a couple days ago, to be able to say it.
Well, it's part of the agenda, isn't it?
Is it
Sure. Continuation of
public hearing, how we conduct the public hearing? Is that okay with everybody?
Well, what are you specific?
I'm just wondering, and I don't know whether this is something that we vote on or whether we just discuss it and think about what we should do in the future, is in the beginning when you had proposed that we do a little bit at each meeting, it sounded good because it wouldn't have as much impact. but we have a lot of work in the board, and clearly our meetings, we need to make our meetings more efficient. So I was wondering if it might make sense for us to have a, maybe, I don't know what it would be technically called, a workshop or a night where we would, as a board, go through all the regs, identify where things should be changed, where things might benefit from updating or enhancing.
Okay, so
Where, we're addressing the multiple unit development component, and then maybe after we have gone through it as a board and worked on it, then once we've finished our work, then have public comment. Because I think that this is very, very slow, drawn out, and inefficient, and I think we're not getting anywhere.
Well, I actually think it's because the topics that we're covering in this public hearing are actually a set of very complicated topics. But what you're talking about in terms of review, the board has done over years, where in the course of doing the work, you come up against something in a regulation that we see that it's not matching up with situations the same, or we're learning from agents or engineers that there are new technologies. And so over the years, the way things have come up for this sort of regulatory review has been by identifying that through the process of doing the work, or people mention they read a section of the regulation and they didn't understand it, or they interpreted it a different way, and then work is done on that. So that's what we did for this set that we have, is we identified a number of topics that had come before us, the elderly housing, number of rooms and how they were measured and that sort of thing. So that was on here for that. The VOCs has long been a subject of discussion. And I can't even remember what the other, I think these are the main ones. And, semi-public water supply, huge issue, incredibly complex. Right, we may have to, I don't even know if we can get through that, because it's just so complicated, and we weren't getting too far on just any agreement of what a starting point would be, and that's what the intent was. My intent, at least, was just to say, can we get anything in place to move it along and then continue to refine it over time. So these have turned out to be really complicated. People have had a lot to say about that. It's been good to get people's input. Sometimes I think it matched a lot of what we talked about when we were even raising these as issues. So, but we still have heard some new issues or concerns and perspectives, and then as the board, we have to weigh that, because it's good to get input, but not everybody in town is here, so we need to do some balancing with our familiarity with the subject matter and what have you. So whether we would have workshops where we sit down, and by workshops it'd be an open meeting, but I think what Rebecca means is that we would just have discussion among the board, maybe just to get through things and talk about it. So we could go through the regs page by page. That would be another approach that we could consider whether we would do that. In terms of process for this public hearing, I don't know about a change, but maybe we could come back to this and get on with the regulation, but maybe later we can come back to whether there's a different path we want to take with this set of proposed regulatory changes. I can see if we can come up with a different way to do it.
Sorry, just one idea, because I sit on a number of Mass DEP closures and have helped revise regulations.
Do you want to come over? That'd be great. Sorry.
No injuries.
Hi, Lisa Can.
Thanks, Lisa.
And so what I was saying is I've participated in a lot of Mass DEP work groups and regulatory revisions and guidance document preparation. And the way DEP has done it, dealing with environmental regulations, just very analogous to this, is that they will take a shot at drafting what they think are good revisions, And then they typically have a couple of work group meetings that are open, so if you want to come, you can come. In general, it tends to be people who are into the nitty-gritty of those particular topics that are being covered, but of course, anyone is welcome to come. And kind of, they get the public sort of review draft in advance. They look at it, so they come prepared. It's efficient. It's usually a couple hours, and people who have read it give their comments and suggestions. Sometimes they give them in writing and verbally, sometimes, just one way or the other. Then DEP takes those comments, looks at them, considers them, and usually takes another shot at drafting, and then either issues those as final or does another kind of workshop thing. And it's worked really, really well because it has practitioners giving feedback on what their experiences in the field really are and what's going to be workable and implementable and maybe what's not. And sometimes it's hard for people, unless you're really doing these sort of things on a day-to-day basis, to understand, like, wow, that's just not going to work. It's not going to be feasible, or it's going to take too long or not be efficient. So I'm just suggesting that's worked really well for DEP, and I think I echo some of Rebecca's comments that I think this is a very probably lengthy and somewhat inefficient way to approach it, and I think we're going to get frustrated and maybe not make the headway that we all want to make. So
I'd say we did something similar to that, where we identified the issues, we talked about them, we took stabs at drafting it, we talked about it again, and then we issued what got printed in the paper for this public hearing. And so in a way, this public hearing isn't the same as having it vetted among professionals in the field the way DEP might. And they put it out they put out regulations for public comment, could come from anybody, but they get, hundreds of responses at times. And then, those stormwater regs for commercial industrial properties came out how many years ago, and then they got so many comments and they went away and they haven't come back, and it's been 6 years, 7 years. So this is not the only place where this gets complicated. So, but in our case, so our residents and sometimes engineers who work in town or whatever, whoever chooses to come, are the ones who are providing the comments. So again, these are just tough issues, and we're trying to find a better way to do it and balance, the simplified, easier, what matches up to other regulations, but what still protects public health. And so, again, in my mind, I've come a little closer to where I think I took a stab at rewriting based on the public comments we heard last time and some of the interests. But we haven't talked about that yet, so we'll try. And Rebecca brings up the interesting issue of how does General Chemical fit into this and the town overall. So there might be strategic issues related.
So I hope you stay there. And maybe Mike Stiller out in the crowd, and LSP can come up if he has comments too. Because they made comments that were very helpful last time. A couple of thoughts. I think the EPA put out yesterday a national advisory, just to what you're regarding to on the hexachromium or chromium 6, which is, and where they want to look at the levels and put it up for public comment, and that will happen in 2017. And of course, the advocacy groups were bemoaning the fact things were dragging along, but and also reading the article yesterday on the hexavalent chromium 6 was that true enough that these standards do have a practicality and not scientific aspect where they can't have the level so stringent so that people can't officially drink their water. And the worst states, I think, were listed were Oklahoma, Arizona, and California. So that the practicality issue gets put in there too, which is not scientific and not, protecting public health. So from the last meeting, Lisa pointed out some things that the standards aren't really current, and that again that's why these things get reviewed. Mike Stiller pointed out if there were anything above zeros on the VOCs to continue monitoring, and the MCLG would require deed restriction. That sounds like very practical approaches. I think they both mentioned that, it's complex, and, I commend your efforts to bring it up as something to review, and it's not been done before. Obviously, it's been a VOC of 0, but it might take some more work to get to more public comment and more experts, because I'm not an expert, and that's why I like to lean on the LSPs on these things.
So I would like, because I've also been thinking about the general chemical, but I did craft something new when I actually, from what's in your packet, have a further change I would consider and think about us implementing this in a stepwise fashion, perhaps. In any case, though, I would want to hear about general chemical, because that has bearing on just the basic, the foundation of this, if that's okay. Okay.
Should I speak there? Sure. All right, I think, I don't know, first of all, general chemical is near and dear to me, and this is not going to be an evening of a long discussion, at least from my part of general chemical, but I think my thought was last meeting, I would be, as I mentioned, I would be cautious about changing the regulation. And it does pertain to general chemical itself, not anywhere else. But the lessons that we learned when I was working on it in Framingham is this, a couple of things. One is, by having the standard that you have in Sherburne, gave us a tremendous amount of leverage. Not the only leverage, but it was a part of that allowed us to do that fight, or continue that fight about general chemical, shutting them down and using the groundwater as leverage to shut them down. It's a long story, but the point is, because of Sherburne's regulations, it was very, very helpful. And it was unique. It is a unique regulation in the Commonwealth. I don't think any other town has a 0 standard in the entire state. But because of that, we found that enormously useful. What I do see, though, as we continue on with the issue of general chemical, it is a different issue. The issues are related, but it's also somewhat different. But by having that standard, it actually acts almost as an early warning system, as well as an ability, I think, to also continue to leverage that for general chemicals cleanup. Part of the issue is, or the major issue is, general chemical is still fighting, or still claiming that whatever contaminants are being picked up in Sherburne are not related to their site. There's no real definite footprint that shows that. Part of it is because you don't have the wells, you don't have the monitoring systems here that can identify the DNAP or the stuff, that part of the plume that's deeper or that's heavier and that's moving in through the bedrock. You have to be lucky to hit that sometimes. And then because the few wells that have been tested in the Sherburne side, some of them picked up small hits. They haven't exceeded the standards set by DEP. So DEP's argument right now, to put it perfectly blunt about it, it's fine, it's no problem. General Chemical's point is, we really don't know. Is that really connected to general chemical or not? Prove it. Well, you have to prove it by testing. And yet the argument about having additional monitoring wells. The fact that you have this regulation, the 0, the fact that we were able to test some of the wells in Framingham and Sherburne, and the fact that we were able to get some hits that were close to 0, it didn't exceed the standards, that became very valuable argument. That helped that argument, it helped the discussion that would not have been there if you didn't have that regulation. It would have been harder to carry that conversation on with DEP. So that's why I think, in brief, without going into all the details of general chemical, that's why I recommend to the board being cautious or to think about that, because one is, I've learned in the experience with that issue, not because you have the regulation at 0, but because you're testing and then you pay attention to those numbers, it almost is like an early warning system. By getting that one hit, oh my word, look at that, look what we've got. This is the same stuff we had in Framingham. Maybe there's a connection, maybe not, but it warrants an additional, it warrants research, it warrants looking for more analysis. And I think if you continue to have that, and you can collect that data here in town, it might be other sites too. There might be other areas. It might not. I don't know. I have no idea, but by having that, and you can start looking at things cumulatively and seeing what the patterns are, I think it can be very, very helpful. I'm not suggesting that you have to put deed restrictions or other things, that's a different issue. I'm just talking about the fact that you can gather the data, and the fact that you use that for awareness, and the fact that we had it in Framingham, you had it in Sherburne, but we were using it in Framingham. We were enormously grateful that you had that, and DEP was not all that happy that you had that. And we were able to use it. And we're still using that in our arguments when we have our discussions and our in correspondence with General Chemical and DEP and with Framingham. But that in brief has been my experience. So in conclusion, I think, I don't know how to advise the board about whether or not it should be 30%, 50%, half, this and that, all these numbers. If I hadn't had the experience in General Chemical, I would say yes, go ahead. But because you have that unique situation here, and because we still haven't come to a conclusion, and because they're still fighting the whole issue of whether or not there is a connection, that is still up for debate and is still going on to this very day, they have not yet admitted, this is helpful.
Okay, so I'll explain as I thought about all the discussions last time, where I was coming out, and it dovetails a bit with what you said, although not driven by the general chemical issue, but I was thinking about the general idea of what I believe was probably the original intent was if VOCs were found, this might be the tip of the iceberg, and you just want to give good warning to the people that, there might be rising levels coming or what have you, or that this is something to continue to monitor. So in that, and then, right, the percentages that we were going to peg it at which it triggered whatever might happen thereafter, was sort of another piece that I was looking at. It sounded like people did not like the idea of deed restrictions or whatever, even though you can have a deed restriction and then you can put more information on the deed that clarifies that earlier information, so maybe there are some remedies there. And then as I thought about the deed restrictions, I thought, well, the real point is that people get informed about this condition, and that was the point of it, was to reinforce with the current owners or whoever had done the testing that this was something that was important to keep track of, or future owners of a property, that this was an issue to watch out for. But I also think that the Board of Health files are another way that they're public, people can come in and look at the file for any property and get that information in there. So when I thought about that, where I was coming out is that maybe there's a simpler way to just divide this without getting into this percent of that and that happening. The general idea being, if you have volatiles that go above the Massachusetts drinking water standards, whole house treatment system. Okay, so that should be clear, because you should not be drinking the water if it's above the drinking water standards. And for us to make decisions, even though I wouldn't want to be drinking at the drinking water standards, but that would be my choice, and that would be any homeowner's choice to look at the results that they have and decide how much treatment they want. But to mandate something that isn't mandated by the state, I wasn't feeling so comfortable with. So that would be one cutoff, is if you've got it above that level, that's it, you've got to treat. Now, you can have your treatment tailored to address just the contaminants that are found. That's, we don't really specify, but you need to get your water drinkable. And then I thought the other thing would be, without making such a big change to what we have, is just to say, if there's a detection of volatiles, that there would be annual testing of the water for volatiles, just to track it through. And that maybe that simply would be the two divisions we'd have, and that those reports would have to be submitted to the Board of Health. So it goes on record. That administratively might mean that we need to have somebody within the Board of Health then spend some time to review that data coming in, track whether it's there. And then perhaps have a process where after some number of submittals of data, we review it to look at trends, or did it disappear over time? Is it on the rise? And the homeowner would also be informed about that, or the well owner. And that maybe that's a way to get at both things that we've been concerned about historically, clarify it. Enforcement would be an issue, or what do we do if people aren't doing that? Maybe then the deed recording would be what would have to happen if sampling is missed, and maybe that would be the backup. So that's pretty much the division, and really volatiles testing. Last time I did it was with the homeowner's package, and so it only cost about $150 extra. But that's the kind of cost we're talking about. It's not an impossible cost. It could be more if you hire the lab to come out and take the sample for you. So as to do it correctly, it does involve some running of water, and there's some protocols to follow, but it's not an impossible thing. It's not expensive.
Can I have one more?
Yes, and then you, and then...
I just want to add too that we learned once again that by having the tests and having some data that came out of these tests, even in Sherburne, it provided us with an excellent opportunity for education and awareness. We weren't advising people not to drink the water, but it was a matter of, it helped in terms of communication. It helped with awareness. It helped with understanding what the larger issues are. And I would want to reiterate too that if the data were supplied to the Board of Health, it would be, I think the Board of Health is the appropriate agency or body to be able to start looking at this stuff cumulatively. What is really going on here in town? Are there any patterns or not? Or is there something that raises awareness no one else is looking at? Because usually we look at things in silos. LSPs look at things in silos. They're hired to do an address. And that's what they do when they put their blinders on, and they do that. Plus, they look at other things they have to, but that's what their concern is, that address, or that property, and where the stuff's going. Board of Health is concerned about what's happening in the entire area. And they have a broader lens than an LSP does, with all due respect, and just you're not hired to do that broader lens. And maybe there's two LSPs or two other, there might be more than one site that's nearby, and the Board of Health is the agency that can really look at that cumulatively, or, in a whole.
If I may, thank you. And after seeing well test results for 30 years, I can say that is being done. And I can tell the board that we have not had any major issues. What we see often is the fact that if we are picking up volatiles, the applicant is offered to do 2 negatives to prove it was erroneous or introduced. And that has occurred in most cases. I may know of only a few, and we know where those areas are. But outside of that, we have not seen any issues with volatile organic chemicals. The natural water coming from your deeper points and ledge is clean. And I think Sherburne's fortunate for that. And it's based on the fact there's limited industrial actions in this town. You may find sometimes heavier metals and so forth, but I have to say in this town I haven't seen that, such as arsenic and lead. So again, I think it's based on the fact that the town doesn't have much industry or commercial businesses here. So we're fortunate that we've seen all these tests through the years, and Ellen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't seen any issues. They usually prove it's erroneous or introduced, and usually introduced. A couple of reasons. The drill water comes from streams sometimes. They shouldn't be doing that because they're introducing chemicals during the process of drilling. Also, when they tape up the wire that goes up for the pump, they find that they found out they should be using non-volatile organic type tape. They're picking up volatiles from the tape. They do now make a product, and they also can use clips. And the industry has found that to work, and we do have well drillers now just spending a few extra dollars to make sure that does work. So they're not introducing any volatiles to the project, because then it's an additional 2 tests to flush it out. So but we've been fortunate. Sherburne's been very fortunate over the 30 years to not find any serious areas outside of the area just mentioned. And we know of I think we're pretty aware of the other area that had been going on since the 80s. Thank you.
So I think, I like your idea of sort of bifurcating the two issues, because I think it was problematic the way it was all kind of one package before, that anything above zero, deed restriction, treatment system, I don't think that was actually necessarily appropriate or workable. However, so I guess two questions. One is, when are you proposing that samples would be collected? Just during new well installation, or would...
That's the way it is now, is it's just new well installation, and then the idea would be, whereas before, if you had above zero, it became a deed restriction and a requirement for whole house. The whole house would only be required if you exceeded drinking water standards, but that repeat testing would be needed. And whether we would structure that for, if your next 2 annual samples came back zero, then you're done again. We could follow the same pattern what we do now, what Mark was talking about, the confirmatory samples. Now, if a sample comes back with any kind of elevated, anything that's problematic, you need 2 sequential samples that show it to be clean, which has often happened. Again, as he said, they'll flush a well and they'll find out that it was something introduced, and therefore when the well gets flushed, then it's no longer there.
But the bottom line is that, so for example, the wells that did have some of the trace levels from General Chemical on that side of town, those wells were existing. Those weren't new wells.
Right.
So the only reason they got tested is because
It was part of the program.
MCP site, and they were trying to delineate the extent of the contamination in the deep bedrock aquifer. So what you're proposing, if it's only for new well installation,
right.
you're not going to get the lens that we were just talking about. So I looked into Carlisle and Boxford regulations, because the research said they're the only 2 other eastern Mass towns that are 100, close to 100%,
Yeah.
not 100%, reliant on private drinking water wells. And Carlisle's pretty silent on the whole aspect of water quality monitoring and didn't really get into it. And Boxford, interestingly, got to something I think that we were discussing at the last meeting, which is that I think it was within 1 year prior to transaction, the well has to be sampled. And I think that is happening in due course for most transactions anyway. I think most buyers, when they are considering buying in Sherburne, they know it's a private well, and their house inspector will counsel them to get the well sampled. I presume most people are testing for volatiles, but I'm not sure. But that's certainly not an unprecedented approach, and I think it would certainly result in better coverage than only requiring it at the well installation. And I think if you make it not punitive, in other words, that you're not telling people they have to put a deed restriction on and start treating it if it's below the Massachusetts drinking water standards, I think that's sort of a reasonable approach. And that maybe, yes, maybe in some cases you might have to do another round or 2 of monitoring, but it's pretty insignificant dollars, and you're not telling them you have to treat this. So that way you would have disclosure, and you would have better coverage than if you were only requiring it, and it certainly does not appear unprecedented based on the regulatory review I did. And furthermore, I think it's standard practice anyway. I think probably, a very high percentage of prospective home purchasers are doing the water testing anyway.
So now, are you advocating this in order to build up our data files about water quality around town? Is that the idea?
I think that would certainly enhance our knowledge level, and I think that there's a lot of us have wells that maybe haven't been sampled in 20 years, or some people maybe even longer. Some people never maybe have sampled their wells if they've been in town for 30 or 40 years. So I just think that this way, it's not only for the new development, which might not give you a broad enough capture to really get a sense of, is our aquifer staying as pristine as we all think it is right now and would like to maintain it, and it would give you a better probability of seeing, hey, maybe there is, a site we didn't even know about before that is migrating to our town. It can certainly happen. It happens, accidents happen, tanks fail, releases happen, trucks have accidents when they're carrying chemicals. I mean, things happen in the world. So just because we're good now doesn't mean that we're going to be good in a year or 5 years. So
Water moves.
yeah, so it's just a suggestion that I think legally wouldn't, isn't a huge hurdle. I don't think it's a huge change in practice, and it's got precedence.
So personally, I would prefer to have that be a little separate from this in terms of, capturing that testing, that discussion. And then I have to say also, personally, I'm more comfortable with the idea of buyers doing the testing than sellers doing the testing for a number of reasons. So, and then how would we enforce that or require those test results, or should we, again, go back into deep and complicated areas?
Well, the Foxborough says that anytime there's a transaction within 1 year of the transaction date, doesn't specify buyer or seller, it just says it has to be done, it could be either party, and those results must be submitted to the Board of Health. I'm just saying, that's what their regulations say. I don't think that's a horrible idea. They don't do any requirements for treatment or any requirements for additional monitoring, etc.
Yeah, I think Cohasset is another town that has a requirement for periodic testing of well water.
Yeah, so this is Mike Steller, 205 Woodland Street. I fully agree with requiring disclosure of the property transaction sampling. And I don't care whether the buyer or the seller does it. I think the likelihood that a buyer or a seller is going to mess with the water sample, it's going to be minimal. You're still going to capture 98, 99% of accurate results, whether you drill down to that level or not. I'd just like to clarify too, you mentioned earlier the concentrations might be a leading edge of a plume. Concentrations are also variable just with season, especially during drought conditions that we see now. And the levels that we're talking about are so low that there's just a lot of variability in the test. So, if you've got 4 parts per billion or 4 parts per trillion, and the standard's 5, that's really not a very different number. And you might take another sample another day, it might be double that, but it's still the tiny levels that you're talking about. It's
right.
There's a lot of variability there.
And I'm seeing that with the client now for chlorate.
Yeah, that's a
And
good one.
that's my other point, is that, and I encourage the board to, as you are, considering this carefully and laying the foundation. We're only talking about VOCs, and maybe we're talking separately about the frequency of the testing, but laying the foundations today are only going to serve you well in the future because of other emerging contaminants like perchlorates or others that may be added to that list later. So having a good foundation of when to test, the frequency or what you do with the results is I encourage you to continue to do that, because I think it's only going to get more complicated in the future. The list may not include just VOCs in the future, it may include some other contaminants
So
that
can
may
I,
or may not be limited to general chemical or downtown Sherburne, but we also share a border with Holliston. We also have, various things that go on in wells that may not have been sampled in the past 30 years for VOCs. And the only way you're going to capture those is during a property transaction.
could I ask the two of you about time of year for a test? Because I know things do vary throughout the year. In here, I just named January, just thinking maybe it would be a somewhat quieter time for the Board of Health to be able to even review the data coming in. So that's the only reason I picked that. Would you name a particular time of year for sampling VOCs?
Most of the wells, I think the vast majority of wells are deep. The contaminants are not subject to that seasonal water table fluctuation up at the ground, close to the ground surface, so I don't think it really matters.
Okay.
I think drought conditions certainly create some stresses that may be different, so
depending on when you sampled, if that coincides with a drought or a flood condition, those results may need to be looked at more carefully or questioned, but I don't think there's a date or range that you need to
January is
specify.
probably not a bad time though, since we are talking bedrock wells, hopefully. I'm making an assumption, but I certainly.
Yeah, most, and especially a new well.
Yeah,
The new wells are going to be there.
But I think January might not be a bad time because drought conditions are more common in the summer, and then high water table and flooding is more common in the spring, so that probably is not a bad time of year to pick, if you need to pick it, because I just don't know, depending on.
No, again, in order to make it more manageable for the board to track, like if there were, I don't know how many we'd even have, as Mark mentioned, we don't have too many instances at the moment, but if it was something we had to track into the future, to have them all kind of lumped together so someone could pick up the stack and go through them at once and review them to see if there was any action needed.
I have a question for you too, if I may, Mike and Lisa. So, getting away from the initial well testing, getting away from, is it a point of sale kind of issue, and getting more back to the, maximum contaminant level MCL or MCLG, which is the MCL goal. How do you take this on as a discussion without actually going to the state standard? I mean, how can we as a 3 or 5 member board say, we think it should be something more stringent without that being, taken on by a developer, taken on by a builder or an owner?
I thought we did just agree that we were gonna set the requirement for the deed restriction and the treatment system if you were above the state MCL. So I
haven't settled on that
I
personally.
haven't agreed on that, but that's my
I would strongly
general.
support that we do keep it at the state
Okay,
standard.
so you said that last time, so I'm saying, if we take this on, how do we not end up at a predetermined point, which is MCL?
That is what we're proposing.
I'm not there yet.
Okay. So are you asking what are the pros and cons, or I guess what are you really asking?
Will it be challenged?
Right, and from my perspective, having sat in another town on the Conservation Commission with a bylaw, and having lived through challenges to whether that bylaw was constitutional or legal challenges to it. In that background, I think using the MCL is something that is an established standard that is
Yes.
more legally.
Understood.
I'm not an attorney, I'm an LSP, I'm a professional engineer. But having lived through some of that, I think that's where it's just kind of a widely accepted standard. You also asked last time about maybe looking at individual contaminants and whether it's the toxicity based or it's an odor threshold that drives that number. A lot of those numbers are driven not just by toxicity.
Cost benefit.
There's a number of factors that go into them, and even there's so many factors and so many different chemicals that trying to dive into each one of those is going to be extremely time consuming for you all, and then potentially less legally defensible unless you're going strictly to the toxicity, and even the toxicity numbers, as Lisa can attest to, are somewhat based, depending on the chemical, on limited data, as you know, in the medical profession as well.
All right, so as a 3-member board of different backgrounds, I'm saying if we're gearing up to take this on and have experts and have testimony, then put something out there in writing and then have public comment, is not...
Oh, this is our public comment, just saying. We've already put it in
further,
writing.
but is it not a foregone conclusion that it's going to end up at the MCL because there may be legal challenges to going anything more stringent, such as an MCLG, which is a goal? You understand? Or saying we're up here theorizing, maybe 25% of the MCL or 50% of the MCL, and what ground do we have to stand on
Well, we're doing
scientifically?
that actually relaxes it from where we are. I'm now withdrawing that proposal and saying, let's just go back to, if you have above zero, do some testing to follow up for some length of time until it, either continues, or if it goes away, then that requirement could go away. So that would be one category. And the other is, if you pass the drinking water standards, you have to treat your water, because we can't say people can drink that water if it doesn't meet the standards. So it's and you only have the deed restriction when you exceed the drinking water standards, which are the MCLs.
Well, either you're ahead of me or I'm lagging on this whole discussion, because my recollection was last 2 weeks ago
we were, and then I was saying I wanted to have a new proposal that says, let's simplify it, because it was getting too complicated, and do just...
Well, that's my point. I don't think there's any in between from what I'm hearing from LSPs and where you are with it, is that you end up at an MCL, which is a state standard, because how can you go to any place else? The old safety factor thing we were talking about.
Right, but I think we could go to a safety factor in the sense that right now we're at zero. So if we've been able to hold it zero, presumably we could hold it a higher level as well. But I was saying, even in one respect, keep some of that stringency of zero, but focus on the intent of the zero, which was to alert people to watch out for what's going on. So, right, that was the intent of having the deed recording, but then did have the whole house treatment system, again, back when detection limits were different. So that was pretty onerous. And I want to say, take out that piece of requiring treatment for an extremely low level, and move that requirement up to just for meeting drinking water standards. So that would be a huge relaxation. The other one would be a different way to address the concern of the warning, the early warning that Ethan was talking about. Does that help? And I know it is a change. I kind of threw away the MCLG, which I like. I do like that in concept, and I like it as a benchmarking. But it was just picking a number and a level, and what happens when, and what if it goes up or down, or should it be 25 or 50%? Just was way too hard and convoluted in how we describe it, and this seemed like it might just be a very simpler way to do it.
Getting back to the point of, if you use a national standard, which is obviously going to be pretty lenient because they want people to be able to legally drink their water, or a mass standard, which is going to be...
No, we have to use the mass standard.
It's a mass.
We have to.
Just let me finish my thought,
Massachusetts
though.
has either federal standards, or where they've chosen to be more stringent at a state level, they've chosen that. Like with perchlorate, it's 1/9 of the federal.
Federal's not even a standard yet.
Right, and the state gets away with that even in the federal system, because they typically base it on science. And that's where, if you can base it on the science, why you want to go to the MCLG, then you would more likely to sustain a legal challenge in court. So that may be appropriate. It may also be appropriate using a safety factor, recognizing the sensitivity of our town versus others. So you may be able to get to and scientifically defend a 50% of the MCL or an MCLG.
That's precisely where I'm going.
You may be able to do that.
Right.
The other piece to consider is in reality. And that's why I'm a practitioner. I do this for work. I'm not just a researcher. What does this actually mean logistically? In reality, you're going to have a new well owner or a new homeowner that is going to have a well test, and it's going to show either just above the MCL or just below the MCL, or some number, some positive result. And your regulation may say, well, if it's above the state drinking water standard, you have to have a treatment system. It doesn't preclude the homeowner from putting in a treatment system that's something less than that. And if they are concerned, you've done part of your mission by educating, making them aware of the condition. So you also can draw a line somewhere what's kind of scientifically defensible, legally defensible, and also just creating the awareness. You're not precluding them from putting a treatment system on. You're mandating it at a state-defined level.
So I also question a buyer doing the testing. I mean, it's clean because if it comes with a hit, the owner can act like they don't know, but how does a potential buyer have access to a home? I know the owner gives them access, but...
Right, the owner gives them access, but I don't think they're the... DEP wrestles with this with 21E program for cleanup of...
You don't have the
You don't have the obligation to report it. So the owner, you have the obligation morally, and even you could, and then they have to present it to the owner, and then the owner has an obligation to notify. But if he doesn't, he decides to just keep the property and then rent it, you know, but again, you're still capturing 98% of the issue.
And I do think you need to be sensitive to varying risk tolerances. I heard people in the audience last time saying, if I want to drink water that's, you know, approaching the drinking water standard, that's my prerogative, or even if it's over. So I think that, you know, we each have our own risk tolerance and comfort level. It's like a pregnant woman in Florida with the Zika virus in Miami-Dade County. Some of them are going to say, I'm not going outside because my risk tolerance for getting a mosquito bite is very low, and I'm just too concerned about a negative outcome. Whereas some people will say, I'll just put on bug spray and I'll just live my life. And I think that is the reality of, it's a very analogous situation that there's a level above which I think you're uncomfortable that public health is not going to be protected clearly, and I think that's above the MCLs. And then I think there's this in-between level that it would be, you know, we want to have information, we want to make sure there's disclosure when necessary, we want to sort of monitor and see if there's trends that we need to be concerned about and maybe deal with, but I think those are sort of two different issues, and I think the way Daryl's considering separating them.
Let me respond to that, and then I'll just be quiet for a bit. That's what public health is, though. I mean, sometimes we have to cancel football games because as a public health agency, we see that there are mosquitoes that are mammal biting, not bird biting, that have Triple E or West Nile. People say, well, I want to take the risk, you know, I feel like going to a football game tonight and get out there and, you know, junior and, you know. And that's our duty, is to say, no, you shouldn't have that, the risk is too high. So I don't completely agree with you, Lisa, but because I think, I'm not in favor of nanny state by any stretch, but I do think we have a role in a public health kind of domain.
Well, and that's what I hope we're accomplishing with the zero. Anything above zero warrants some retesting. Does that seem reasonable? As opposed to... No. Oh, okay.
Richard?
If you want to mandate testing connected to house property transfer, you can't restrict it to a particular month of the year because you're going to have it every year.
But that was only the follow-up testing that we're trying to target. So, right, the original well installation or something else. But I also, if we're going to do testing, I would rather we address that issue at another time because we'll never get anywhere if we add that in, because I can see it'll be a complex topic and we never started with that as a possibility. So I think we should add it to the things that we're going to think about. But that I could see being a separate effort and maybe a little more broad of, do we want as a Board of Health to do testing around town to understand what condition the town is in, to then educate people and what are all the implications of that, and maybe unintended consequences, and how would you structure it to get the kind of information you want. And so that I see as a whole separate,
If I can.
not wholly separate, but hugely separate.
We have done that. We've tested along transmission lines. We've used our water testing funds for various parts of town. And I just wanted to note, I think it would be an important opportunity to maybe start looking at what's been discussed, and that's testing at the point of a sale to try to get more data. We're fortunate to have the 30 years of data because it does indeed involve the entire town, because it's just not new wells, it's replacement wells that were drilled deeper. So we've been in the older established neighborhoods as well as, I'd say, throughout the town, but I really like the idea of collecting data and obviously offering the new owners to know what they have there. The only other point I wanted to make is there's a brochure out there that's been out there for a while that Mass Health officers and the Mass DEP produced. It's a threefold. It's excellent, and it talks about private wells and what you should be doing. And as we work through this, at least at this present time, Ellen, I believe we have information on the web. If that's not, we could easily scan that and put that on the web as well. It's because the education's just as important as we move forward with changes to the regulations. Thank you.
Yes?
So I think this, as a non-expert, I think this sounds like a really reasonable proposal that you put out there. It's practical and it's doable, and I agree that the financial burden of retesting a couple of times, if it's going to go away, is perfectly reasonable. I think part of the reason why it was a big financial burden with the zero tolerance is because there was a time pressure if someone was selling their house, and potentially also could scare away buyers and things like that. So I think all of this makes perfect sense. Two questions. One is, do you separate out the VOCs from the disinfectant byproducts, and do you want to use separate language for that? And do anything different? And then secondly, I don't know if you want to get into it, but I'm wondering what your plans are with the sodium threshold, because that is fairly widespread.
So, right, the sodium was balled up in there. Pretty much as I had done a redraft was just to leave that as it was, that there'd be a deed recording if it exceeded 28. So no big change there. However, I thought we could change the language that said you would, in the deed recording, you'd have to indicate the concentration and the health impacts. And I thought I would rather have people research it, because over time, and maybe sodium's a little simpler than some others, but over time health impacts change. So to me, locking in health impact data to a finding at a particular point in time might not be the whole story, and I thought would be misleading over time as new information emerges about different chemicals. Again, sodium maybe is better understood, but who knows? We may find something new. So I'd rather have somebody just know that it existed, what the concentration was, what the date of the test was, and then go research what that might mean for them and whatever their health issues might be. So that I saw as a potential change, but aside from that, the sodium would stay the same. But again, this is just my proposal to try and dissect it, and maybe over time would look at whether zero was the trigger or not. But I just thought picking a percent now of the MCLG and or MCL, whichever came out to be lower, blah, 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 it just started getting more complex, should be. In terms of what Chris was talking about is, right, it's our duty to be warning people. So zero, we've had it for a long time, it's a warning, this makes it a little less onerous and provides follow-up. So rather than just a deed recording that people weren't so keen on, we have Board of Health records that people could look at, and the continued testing actually gets to what it is we really want, that people be informed and make sure it's not going to go haywire and they're going to be drinking horrible things. So, does that make sense? And then a little bit, actually, based on what Ethan said, tied in, it says, okay, we have General Chemical, not that I would have that be the driver of any decision, but okay, that to me helps tip the scale a little and say, we're working on that, and there's a path set, and this stays where we are, in a sense. Highlights the importance to the board of this, and why it's important to us, and why low levels are important to us, because they're mostly not naturally occurring. So They're the sign of something coming in from somewhere, from us.
Just one more comment on that. If you, to the extent that you're thinking of kind of monitoring as a town, maybe doing more wells at the point of exchange, please have an organized system for putting it in a database where you can actually access the information. It should not be sitting in paper files somewhere, because then you'll never understand what you actually have there. It shouldn't be in someone's memory.
Right, and there might be a way to tap into the system that labs use to report to EDEP, because I know I can extract data from those. It's not convenient because you can only get it sort of one record at a time, and then you have to build up the spreadsheet, but it's, except we have, as a town, what I've done in the past is periodically I've gone to the DEP and said, please give us the data for Sherborne on public water supply. So, and they've been able to provide that in a batch because we're a municipality asking. They normally wouldn't do that, but they have done that for us, and they've accumulated all that data. So maybe there's software out there that they could share with us if we were doing it on a town level that we could then use whatever labs, however they're working it now. And I don't know if you know exactly what those systems are. Whether it would be
Everything's electronically provided by the labs and easily put into either a database or, I was thinking maybe we could get a grant for a GIS layer, a GIS map, so that we would have an interactive map, just like the one I put a link to next door Sherburne that the state has for public wells. Maybe I'm thinking too big, but there are grants available for municipalities to get that kind of, GIS management system. Maybe even emergency preparedness somehow we could, I don't know, link it in, because you might need to have certain types of information for that. So, but certainly in a database format, that the data from the lab can easily be pulled into Excel.
Right. It's more the I can see from the records I've looked at, you can get that one record at a time, but then it's just tedious to add them together. So you kind of get an Excel spreadsheet with one data entry and all the information about that sample, but that's it. So then you just have to work it, add it all together, and it'd be nice to skip that add it all together step is what I was thinking. And then, so we're getting a little off topic because this relates to the ongoing, but just so you know, we've talked about the mapping of, because we have some well data that we've collected and organized from well drilling records. But what we don't have is, except for on the plans, but we don't know exactly in any other way where those wells and septics are on a property without pulling out paper files. So it would take a whole bunch of work, or people with GIS going out in the field and getting access to people's lands, standing next to their well, or else taking all those paper files and figuring it out from there. So that's a big hurdle.
I feel like an internship of some kind, maybe.
Yeah, we used to think a student who might want to walk all around the town or something. Girl Scout project.
Yeah, exactly.
Something. So, all right, so...
Try to sell you a cookie.
Yeah, any other comments? Do we want to try to vote on something on this? Are you guys feeling at all comfortable with what I proposed? And then we could work on the specific language. Even what I had sent you, I've since thought about it some more after going through this exercise, and we pare it down from here.
Can you really vote until you have the specific language?
All neatly written out, you mean? It would probably be hard, so... All right, then let's talk about general concepts. So two I've proposed, but feel free to throw out any other ideas, was whole house treatment systems only required when the state drinking water standards are exceeded. And by exceeded, I mean too high, not exceeded like really great quality. But
Right, negative exceeded.
Yeah. in a way you wouldn't like, exceeded. So that's the one piece, is that that's what triggers the treatment system, not anything above zero. Okay, so that's one piece, and then the other was, right now we have, if anything above zero is detected, you also have a deed recording. And then and the treatment system, then that's the end of the story. But, so now it would be anything above zero, you'll have to do follow-up monitoring to see where things are headed.
Just with my experience with this, and I respect the timing at the sale, but it gets very complicated after the sale. Why was this not done prior to the sale? Why am I now responsible for this? I mean, obviously, the attorneys involved with the sale of a property should be working that out prior, but that does occur, and so saving it for the future, I would ask even our town council if we could run ourselves into some legal issues.
There's no way to enforce it.
And that's,
Okay, and-
Rebecca, you bring out a good point, if you don't mind me, very difficult to get into someone's home too, or to get something done once they're in there.
Okay.
It's no different from septic systems. We can't force them to test them, we recommend it, the education, the difficult, and when they go to sell, obviously, that's a time where transactions are occurring, but I look at this possibly as being, a challenge. I'm not saying everyone will it'll be a challenge with every situation, but there will be some challenges with it.
Okay, so I guess for this, I just want to limit what we're considering now to how we have it now, which is when a well goes in, for a new well. I think the other topic of whether there's other testing, whether it's every 5 years, whether it's when it's bought, when it's sold, some other thing, that to me is another big topic area, so I wasn't thinking we'd consider that, because right now the reg is written just for when a well is going in.
But if anything if you were saying, no, anything above zero, do follow-up?
Yes.
Is it the follow-up after the sale transaction?
This has nothing to do with sales. This is just new
well,
well goes in,
yeah.
and if you found something that was above zero but below the drinking water standard in that range, then you need to do follow-up testing. I agree that enforcement will not be simple.
New construction especially, because new construction, that time lapse goes quick, and it shrinks very quickly when it sells. So I'm just talking about the follow-up. If anything above zero, do follow-up.
Yeah.
Well, if it's new construction, we gotta look at the timing of it. And
Okay.
is the follow-up prior to sale, or is the follow-up after sale? And then I already discussed the issues.
Okay. I see what you mean now. Okay, so back to then the general concepts. Is this something you're willing to go down the path? Do another rewrite? Try to clean it up or not? I've talked a lot, so I'm done. It's your turn.
Various people told us before we...
Oh, I'm not asking for a vote on it.
Oh, okay.
I just want to know what you're generally thinking, or questions, or... Because I think Ellen's recommendation that it just be rewritten so we're looking at as close to final something as possible is a good idea.
Yeah, you shouldn't vote until you have the final.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So
When we're voting.
that's why I was saying the two major points, and just conceptually, do you think yay, nay?
Sure. I do think the follow-up monitoring, not even When you're just talking for a new well, so someone proposes a new well, typically, it's either for new construction, so it's a developer who is going to sell, or a new well could be drilled because the outside testing done for a sale finds that either there's not the quantity or the quality, and they require a new well. So again, it's for a sale. Very rarely is it a new well when someone's still living there, although there are. Like and right now, a couple of the sort of thing, the drought, there are those, but most of them are for sales.
And we still stumble across a few shallow wells.
Yeah, well, that's what, yeah. And that's what I think these were tonight.
12-foot
Couple of
well.
emergency.
Well, we had the daycare center last time.
Right.
But most of them.
Okay, so maybe the January would have to have some other qualifiers. Because if they do the test in November,
And then
the house is
it's sold.
ready or something.
Or it's sold to a new buyer. Which will make it difficult. Which is why the two subsequent tests now, they're quick.
Right. Right. Yes?
While they're thinking, we'll give them more stall time. You probably also have to think in writing of how to apply to these multi-unit developments, whether they're 40B or, over 55 or whatever they are, as a minor concentration, then you have obviously that condo board or whatever it is that really do the testing.
Well, interestingly, the way they're structuring those or have been proposed in town is that, right, you have a group who's owning a specific well. So
Yeah, that's true. That's another.
it would be their duty to do it.
It could complicate it though, because what if, one well is fine and as we know, the bedrock wells, one certain immediately adjacent building might not be fine or something, because they're separate parts of the aquifer. That could complicate.
No, but they are, the way they don't become public water supplies is by designating them as only owned by the group who is drinking from that particular well.
Right,
But
right.
That could potentially make it even more difficult
Yeah.
to get follow-up testing done. Because then you're trying to get a small but a group of homeowners who aren't organized, or at least a condo board has some duties.
Yeah, and is the sale of one unit, say 5 years after development, you sell one unit, does you have to test the water? You're just selling a unit in a complex that say maybe 4 units are sharing a well. So 4 units are sharing a well.
I think you should.
Plus,
That constitutes sale.
Again, that's why I don't want to go down the future testing, just want to do it for new testing, because the future testing, there are all those weird things.
Yeah, but you're proposing to do it for any time there's a transaction.
No, that was raised as an issue, I don't even want to do that now. I just want to look at the way we have it
Just
written
new
now.
construction only?
Yeah, new wells. Our regs are right now oriented, I know we might want to do, I'm just saying it's too hard to weave into what we have here now.
Okay,
Because
plus, Jeff, if the
millions of possible.
neighbor wants to tap into the good well,
So, nothing says if we make.
where's that paragraph, that temporarily you can tap into the good well of your neighboring group of homes, townhomes.
Well, all right, whatever you say.
Actually, that would make the public water supply, which you would love to share your water with others. So anyway, and it would expand the number of people. But just so you know, doesn't mean we would ignore the issue of possible testing at other times, because we can always add to the regulations, but right now we have a regulation that just talks about new wells and testing done at that time. So that's trying to zoom in on, because otherwise, right, it'll be 5 years and we'll still be. I don't think. So, I'll get you in just a minute. we're still on our hearing on this regulation, and so that's the question. Do you have any comments? Because I'm happy, but then I proposed it, so yeah, I'm happy. With some little tweaks here and there, and maybe have to do something about when exactly it gets retested, and it's not ideal. But conceptually, I have an easier time with this. But do you want to weigh in so that I don't waste my time writing if nobody else is going to support it? So that's my question. Go ahead.
I have a question for your question. I was distracted for a moment because I was looking back at our current regs. You are saying you're not going to deal with semi-public water supplies right now, is that?
No.
That's the answer, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Because the way that
We have that we did have that as a topic, but oh boy, I don't even.
I just want to point out one thing though, and that is if as you rewrite the regulations, then perhaps your current regulations does have a definition for semi-public water supply, but that doesn't do anything with it. It doesn't address it, doesn't mention it whatsoever.
Just loosely says that we can make other
doesn't even say that.
requirements elsewhere. There is mention in our regs, yeah. So
I have to look at it again.
I have it marked off. But
Yeah, all right. I just wanted to raise that question. Okay.
And we did talk about that at the first public hearing that we had on August 17th.
Long time ago. All right. That's all. Just fine. Thank you.
And right now, for the semi-public, we're just applying these regulations, which for now could still apply. Right, and we could sit here all day, every day, all year, and whatever. So, someone else, Ann.
I have a question about the semi-water supply, because I was not able to attend the in-between meeting. Is that discussion just being totally tabled for now, or just,
We haven't voted on that. So I think there may be issues in town that to me are driving the importance of this particular.
VLCs?
Yeah.
So you haven't withdrawn that as a possible
No,
change?
we talked about the first several issues at the first meeting, the second meeting, we only talked about this one, third meeting, we're only talking about.
Okay.
As it turns out, we're only talking about this one because I don't think we're going to go much longer in the interest of time. So,
I understand your concern about enforcement of repeat testing, but remember, by definition, we're talking about drinking water that meets standards, right? Because otherwise you're in that whole other bucket and have a treatment system. So this is drinking water that meets state standards. And I think that most people, if the Board of Health says we have a little concern about your water, we really want you to test it again in a year, they're going to do that. So I don't think that has to be a rigidly enforced thing. I think it'll happen most of the time. And you have to trust it.
let's say it was going to some of Chris's concerns that he expressed. It wasn't at the drinking water standard, but it was at 95%. That's a whole different ballgame in terms of the importance of that retesting, hugely important. So, and then I don't think we should be treating things differently unless we specify what those trigger points are for treating things differently. So once you're over zero, then the driver is kind of the same no matter where you are, unless we want to start adding all sorts of other levels. But again, it just seems too complex right now. Just sticking with what we have, zero, and making it, again, the idea of the sampling was to make it a little more meaningful in terms of the long-term issues, rather than just a deed recording that people may or may not think about.
My experience has been, if I may weigh in, people are all over the place when it comes to once they have knowledge and what they do with it. There are people who would obsess about it, they might test monthly. There are people who will say, well, gee, after a year I haven't dropped dead yet, I don't want to know. And it ranges from those two bookends. And I think having some sort of regulatory, at least advice or standard or something, could really help. And you can hang your hat on, gee, you should be doing it monthly or annually, whatever it happens to be. because people really, they surprise you. Sometimes they don't want to get the facts in the way, some people don't want to know, others are really interested.
Right.
They're everywhere.
And I have no problem making the requirement. I'm just saying, don't worry about the fact that, you can't throw them in jail if they don't do it.
But so I think my advice to the board is having at least something, some sort of a policy or guidance or something in there that says this is what you should do.
Or not should.
Or must, or shall, yes. I think it's enormously helpful. At least you have something that you can, work with.
And then we can have volunteer doctors, wink, wink, go out and encourage people who have had high levels in their water of the importance of doing the retest if they haven't been following through properly. So.
Work on medications and compliance while you're doing that too.
Okay, so I'd just like to get some guidance from my fellow board members as to whether I should attempt to clean this up or not, or you hate it, or you want to
Clean it up, but I really need to think about it.
okay?
I think I'm ready to.
I think you're further ahead than I am on this because, like I said, I'm at a particular point where the logical progression of this is going from 0 to the MCL.
Only in terms of treatment, not in terms of awareness and tracking.
But I'm not convinced the MCL, even though it's state and not a national one, is...
Okay, so you might say at some percentage of the MCL is when you're required
I mean, we know how they make these levels. They say, well, is 1 in 10,000 cases of liver cancer acceptable? Okay, well, what if we put the level to this? Nothing scientifically stated, it's just going to preclude anyone from drinking the water, and then they use the practical measure, and then they use the scientific measure, and that's how they come up with these things. They don't say what causes 1 in a million cancers, which sounds a little bit more palatable than 1 in 10,000 liver cancers. So, if I were assured that a state standard was based all on science, that would give me a comfort level, but I'm not convinced because I know how, how laws get made. It's not
Okay, so
it's
how
not a good
about,
process sometimes.
think about then the percent, if there's a percentage or something else, or the MCLG. Or could we still have anything above 0 is going to be a tracking issue? So right now we have 0 and some tracking and then MCL and treatment. But maybe this stays the same and this slides over closer to 0 by some amount. So it's below the MCL, but not all the way back to 0. Because I have to say, part of me says, you could have tiny amounts of something in the water, comes out above 0. I don't even know if we always have the technology to reduce it, so we're requiring a whole house treatment system with unknown efficacy, and then what's the performance measure? It's a little more vague.
Could I follow up on, Chris, your comment though, which raises like a practical issue is, let's look at lead as a metal. I know we're talking about VOCs, but lead, we know, everyone says, all the scientific data, there's no such thing as a safe level. But yet when we do testing, and there are thresholds, and you take 5 tests, and you throw out the bottom 2, and you average the top 3, and then you come up with a number. And even though you might have a hit or two that's above the standard, if you average it out, and then all of a sudden it's okay. But yet we already know it's not okay. So you have a regulatory standard that says it's okay, but we also know scientifically it's not okay. What do you do with that? To follow up on your comment.
Well, and then that goes to semi-volatiles and heavy metal, the RCRA 13 metals and pharmaceuticals and all the other things that we just don't have the bandwidth at all as a little town to do.
But that goes back to the heart, I think, of your point, and that's the struggle I would have.
Right.
And I will reiterate that we haven't seen a problem. except for the areas of concern that I mentioned earlier. As it relates to new wells not existing drilled into probably a deeper aquifer. We have, as I mentioned, those two areas. Ethan knows of the one he just mentioned with General Chemical, and there's another area in the town. When wells are drilled, they've been proven to show that the volatiles, at least, are erroneous or introduced. We're very fortunate in that respect that I haven't seen anything. No alarms have gone off, because typically it's just, if they did it properly, they probably wouldn't have any issues. We have well drillers that do it and take their time, use the right equipment, and they make sure there's no gas fumes when they're taking the samples, because most of it's introduction. What I was leaning to, I've mentioned this before at meetings, and we're talking about this right now, is the science versus the practicality. When EPA and the state look at these regulations, they're looking at public drinking water. They're not looking at private wells.
That's right.
And they have to adjust for treatment and how to supply for public health reasons. So, and I've been researching tonight to see if I could find anything out there. Minnesota has something, but you can tell on private wells, there's not enough study out there. So I don't even feel comfortable recommending zero or a certain percentage, because there's limited information out there outside of public drinking water. But understand, those standards are set based on the fact that there'll be treatment, the fact that they have to get that supplied to the people.
There'll be testing quarterly, monthly, whatever.
No, it's,
And that too.
the public water supply, I don't think it's so much on the treatment, because you only treat if you're not meeting the standards.
I'm not-
It is that it's routine, always checking, what are the levels, are they still...
I'm sorry, I meant treatment of the water for chlorine and so forth. When you have a water treatment plant, that's what I meant, that
The
treatment.
standards that they need to meet is the end point, the finished
Correct.
product and
Yeah.
what's going out. So
But I've
whether
read some
they need to treat or
data.
not is driven by what the original quality was, but the standard applies to the...
Yeah, I'm not saying, and I'm not, maybe I'm explaining it wrong. When you read the definition of the EPA drinking water, public drinking water regulations, it says they were adopted with the consideration that that public water may be treated. So the standard set not based on science at all levels, it's based on practicality to get water supply to the general public. That's what I was trying to say. So it's not that's pretty much why they were set at the standards there are. And you'll see them lower them now and then, and you're going to see a lot of information come out right now with the hexavalent chromium-6. You're going to see that, with various communities too. It's based on where they're drawing their water. We can go to Flint, Michigan. That's a major concern that they drew out of a river when Detroit should have given them their water. All those things add into this, and they set standards based on supply and treatment. It's in the literature.
Okay. Thoughts?
I want to discuss it, but I really want to get moving on the agenda because it's getting really late and I'm so tired.
Okay, so, okay,
I have nothing else to add.
all right. If you think of anything, write it down, send it out, and we'll have it at the next meeting. I'll take a stab at something, and I'll try to write what I do in a way that could be amended to incorporate moving off of the MCL in some direction. That would be a consideration. All right, so the hearing will be continued to, when's our next meeting, October something?
It's October 5th.
October 5th, and do we have other things scheduled?
I believe 2 variance hearings already scheduled.
So that would be 7:30 to...
7:50.
Okay.
8. You do 8:30 or
8:30? Let's do 8:30, just so we...
So are we going to know a lot more then? I mean, do we necessarily have to have this because every meeting is...
Unless we want to give up on the...
And we still don't know if we're a 3 or 5 member board. I brought that up last time. We know we're not
But we could
changing to...
still doing the work, and that won't happen until May if it's voted in at town meeting.
But you may have other
Elections happen in
opinions.
May. I think we've heard a lot of opinions through this process, so I don't know that...
We may have other voting opinions.
Yeah. So, Next meeting or not next meeting?
We're talking about whether or not we vote at the next meeting?
Or whether or not we bring it up again at the next meeting? I'd sort of like to get it taken care of. Comment?
I'm in favor of a workshop.
Closure on this. This has gone on for how many hours of testimony now? It's been 15 hours of meetings, and it was first raised 2 years ago. You've been meeting about it for 3 months. I think you need to do it.
We could also vote no action, which is maybe where it would end up right now, so.
Well, that's not doing your job, right? I think you need to do your job and make a decision on this. Maybe not today if you really can't, but you need public lands and finish it. And putting it off till May is not okay.
May?
I don't know, that was just mentioned.
I was just going to add something about the October 5th thing. I'm not related to what you're asking the question, but the two issues before the annual town meeting, the special town meeting are health related issues, and the advisory committee's public hearing is October 5th.
Oh, yeah, we need to do it a different night.
Starts
I
at
need to
7 p.m. and I think it's the
Two variance hearings have already been scheduled. We have to.
We haven't, I mean, that's been posted a year, almost.
And these people have already notified.
October 5th and 19th.
Yeah, we have to have our meeting that night for the variance hearings.
Yeah, okay.
The mailings have gone out, that's been,
What time do you start?
7. It's open to the public, it's a public meeting, so it may affect the turnout. You'd
Okay.
probably be the police station, I would guess, because I think you're going to open up both these rooms.
Yeah, you'd be taped.
Somebody else is already in the police station.
They don't use both rooms, you can take it to the next room, I can look again.
Yeah, but
If you go to the police station, I'll go over there.
I think somebody, ZBA is in the police station already. I posted that meeting, I posted it
Well, we
for
can
that
meet in
one.
the downstairs room.
What downstairs?
No, we've met in before. If we don't continue this.
yeah, but even
Is
for
it
the
possible to
other,
have a workshop where we can sit down and work on this stuff?
it would still be a public hearing.
I understand that. I don't want it to not be a public hearing. I just want to sit down and work on it and focus on it and not have it be 11 o'clock at night and we haven't even done half the meeting, half the work. It's just too late.
Okay, so,
And so I propose, I don't know whether I would move that we choose a date and that we work and it can
because
be
we
an
have
open
to give
meeting.
the date that we're continuing this to now. That's the issue. We have to know what day it's going to be and what time. So, that's why the 5th was easy, because we have a meeting, but if we're going to pick another day, we need to decide on that now, so we can do this.
Is it possible to work and then prior to that date, so we can vote on that date?
We could just have deliberations along the board
Yeah.
with the public as we're deliberating.
I have no problem with the public. It's about us getting it done and working and feeling comfortable.
I mean,
going through it.
And part of it, I'll say, there has to be a little homework outside, and I
Right.
spend time in between so that I know what I even want to think about when I come, so. So do we want to do it on the 5th or another day? Between now and the 5th, or after the 5th?
What are they talking about in their meeting? Just meeting?
I think they're probably just going
I'm gonna have to go to that meeting, because I wrote the warrant article.
Okay,
The
so
5th
that would
needs to be a brief,
complicate the
yeah.
5th.
What about, I mean, is it possible, we've had special meetings for other reasons, could we have another meeting on the following week or the third week or something to discuss and vote on this and maybe find some time to work between now and then?
Now, working on it is, I would think, is going to be, so to work without a public hearing, so we don't drag the public into it, and then come back again and vote in a public hearing?
Why don't we have an open meeting?
Yeah, we're doing a flu clinic too,
Yeah.
Tuesday the 18th.
I mean,
Tuesday the what?
18th. And the 10th is a holiday.
Are you only looking at Wednesdays?
No,
Just looking at the month.
we're looking at the calendar. You can continue till the 19th, that's just longer.
Or do we want to, okay, so if we continue the hearing, but try and have a work group before then, so that we're ready on the 19th?
Yeah. I mean, I would like that.
Would that work for you?
Maybe, I don't know, I can't say. Just, I'm already penciled in for the flu clinic, so that's an additional night.
What night is the flu clinic?
The 18th, Tuesday.
How long does that run?
It goes,
Yeah.
like our meetings.
Never mind, I was gonna say we could maybe piggyback on that somehow.
A couple stragglers who don't quite make their appointment time. Then we have extra doses, so we start calling people. It's very amorphous.
Get distracted, inoculate people several
We
times.
don't leave till we have 0 doses left so that we can get it the next year from the state. But don't tell anyone.
Take 2 days. It's all facility.
What's your address? Town hall?
All right, continue to the 19th, and we'll find another day in between now and the 19th to work it out in an open meeting, but not part of the hearing, just regrouping.
Let me know your ideas, I'll see if I can. I haven't,
Okay, so do
Can't
you know
guarantee it.
anything about the 19th schedule?
And now there's one variance hearing scheduled so far.
Okay.
I don't think there'll be another, because it's already the 21st, so.
All right, so let's do the 19th at,
Or it could be the 19th is the 2 variance hearings. Not
the
25th.
19th at 8:30?
Yeah, that would work.
So we're continuing this public hearing to the 19th at 8:30, but keep your eyes peeled if you're interested. We would have the board having a discussion about what we've been learning at the public hearings, and I assume that's okay to do, to review, because we're still taking public comment at public hearings and discussing it, but is it okay to kind of step to the side a little bit and just try to focus on,
I don't know.
never had to do this before.
find a lawyer.
If I can,
Yeah, you know?
that might be able to help. You can have your public hearings,
Yeah.
gather all that data, then the board can meet without a public hearing to discuss the data that you collected from the various people and make some decisions that way. You don't have to make decisions at the public hearing, but you can obviously take all the information you received and then meet, for your own discussion. The chair doesn't have to entertain any further discussion because you've had it all at the public hearings.
That's what Rebecca said a half hour ago.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rebecca.
Maybe it wasn't clear.
And we can go back into public hearing, which I would think would be okay if we go off, discuss, and come back to issue whatever we've come to and have the final discussion and vote. All right. Okay, fantastic, that's what we're gonna try and do. So that we can get through this. All right, and then we'll look for another day between now and the 19th. So 19th, 8:30, continuation.
All set?
That is the goal. That is the goal. Okay,
Was what?
so one thing, so that you can go after being here, is Abbey Road, anything, status update? No, not yet.
That's the end, okay. Am I the end?
That, we have one more thing after that, but after this you may go.
I'll take that. Okay.
The SNAP solutions.
Please do.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Run, Mark. So don't trip.
We actually have a chance of getting a new year's record on end time. Oh, no, go ahead. So,
Abbey Road is very brief. Two things, they are in the bottom inspection of the field, and they've now come in with the bottom sand and the gravel, and that passed the sieve analysis. And they're supposed to put in the trenches today, but as of 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I went by there, it hasn't happened yet, but that was the original plan. In terms of safety issues, which we brought up last week, or the other week, they're improving. They're not there yet, but they're improving. There are some issues. So, for example, for those of you in the public, you can actually walk on the site without anybody stopping you if you go in the back, which is not a good idea. But
hopefully that could be addressed by meeting with all the workers and just telling them, or telling some certain number of workers to...
It's not so easy to say. I think they also have subcontract. There's things going on there, but...
Oh, because it's confusing who's who.
But in any event, if you go in through the front or off of Leland Street, those two entrances, the official entrances, they've really greatly improved, and things are looking up. But if you go in the back, there's a road, there's a circle at the end of Leland Street. You go to the back where the field is. It's pretty wide open. But in general, they're improving. That's all I have to say.
Can you just tell me, what is their structural support? What concerned me were the big heavy equipment on the edge of those big holes without structural support. Is there any structural support yet?
That big hole is filled, not filled entirely, but the two tanks are there. There's the pump tank and the septic tank, and they've filled in most of the sides. So it's better than our protection. There's a barrier around the edges of that excavation. But I think there's improvement. It's not perfect at this point, but I'm not sure. Unfortunately, it's not really the Board of Health's jurisdiction.
Yeah.
But I'm working with them. One thing I can also say too, it's kind of unfortunate, I think, they told me, I'll just share this with you, they told me, for example, we should be proud. They wanted me to know that how many workers they sent back to make sure they had appropriate clothing and equipment on. They sent them to Home Depot or wherever else to buy. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the rules are, that's the responsibility of the people that hire them to make sure they have the appropriate clothing and buy it for them. It shouldn't come out of their pocket. So there are things like that that are happening that just, again, those are issues. If you saw the Sunday Globe article on the front page about labor and safety and also appropriate pay, this sort of fits into that pattern where they don't always follow all the rules. But again, it's something I'm working with a little bit as much as I can, because I think we have a moral obligation to do that. But it's greatly improved.
Okay, it's good to hear. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's see, and then the last thing I wanted to mention is last thing on our agenda, besides agenda items, for next time, we received a letter from the Inspector General, and when they had issued a letter in the past, we responded and talked about the things that the Board of Health was doing and would be doing also in connection with what the town was undertaking in response to the Inspector General's letter. And that was, as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, a lot of that had to do with best practices, procedures that they recommended. Again, not necessarily requirements, but ways that we could address various accusations that were being made and to have the tracking for it. So, they've asked for some information that we had mentioned in our letter. Some of it they already had, and this was an issue from before. I spent hours on the phone with people from the IG's office, and we had provided them with information, but somewhere along the line of their issuance of the prior letter to this one, that got misplaced and they had forgotten about it and didn't account for it. So some of it will be resubmitting information that we've submitted. And then providing things that have taken place in between. As I mentioned, there's a new form that we've developed, so we've just gone through it, just to standardize for various folks to use who have to provide their hours to us, the part-time employees who are out in the field, so. And they were doing their own versions, so now they have one version they can use and follow, and that's been vetted in the town. So we'll be pulling that together. And I don't know if you got to see the letter, but Ellen's already started on pulling together a lot of the information that they requested. So, all right, great. Okay, and then any additional agenda items for next time that you can think of? And I guess one option is that at that 10-5 meeting would be a work session. We would have to tack on to the meeting, so if we can find another date, we could do that, and you have the appointment on the 5th, so we'd have to work around whenever you need to be an advisory, but it's an option.
Tonight it was
Longer than you.
Well, I'm willing to come on a different night to get some work done, and I think we really would benefit from it. That's my opinion. I think we could get more work done, we could be more focused, we could cover more stuff. And because we're sort of focusing and seeing more big picture, we can just be more productive, I think.
Okay. All right, so we'll try to come up with some possible dates and see if we all have something that overlaps. Yes, so anything else out there? So I'm going to adjourn the meeting. We're going to be signing the things that we voted on earlier tonight. So they stamp the plans and then we sign them. So, okay, so all for adjournment, aye?